Good morning, good day, and good evening to you, wherever it is that you might find yourself at this beautiful moment in time. Welcome to the Wednesday Wanderer, the show where we unravel the beauty of adventure and creativity one story at a time. Today I'm excited not only for releasing the very first episode of this weekly series, but to have the great and insightful Jace Galloway on the show. Jace has been working on a multitude of projects, building his creativity and branding, and also allowing a platform for others to be able to learn from what he has found on the internet. These projects can be found under the names the Library of Consciousness, Library of Alexandria, which we dived well deep into, mental health, the schooling system, and all other types of issues and things leading up to the perspective and why he does the things he does. So let's jump right into it, and I hope you enjoy the episode. And we are good to go. Hello, Jace Galloway. How's it going?
Really good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't lie. I'm having a really good day with all this overcast, and it's just putting me in a really good mood. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it's a good change of pace with sunny Southern California, and we got a little bit of overcast. Change is good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, see, I'm from Georgia, so I'm used to getting some rain at least once a week. So whenever I wake up and I get this beautiful overcast, I'm like, hey, I'm home. That's what's up. So, Jace, I've been talking to you for about a week now. We've been talking about your Library of Consciousness project that you're putting together.
Yes.
So go ahead and just tell us a little bit about the basics of what it is that you're putting together.
Yeah, so the basics, that's best to go over as to why we're putting this together. So it started with just my own story from my own frustrations of education growing up. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, the schooling system was trying to figure out how to, accommodate, so many students at that time with so many new opinions, and it just got to the point where they noticed that some children were being left behind in the education system, and they started up something at that time called No Child Left Behind.
Right.
And that
I remember that as a 22-year-old. I was in the height of that whole push to getting that done. I remember that.
Yeah, and I was about middle school when that started taking off, and I was one of those people that was left behind, and it was standardized everything, no innovation on the teacher-to-teacher level. That's something that's been almost completely abandoned in America now, that No Child Left Behind Act, but it messed up my school career, but I was fascinated in learning regardless. This was also the time where the internet was taking off, and there was more TV channels than ever before, so there was a lot of things. I remember in middle school, I was very interested in outer space. I picked up a Stephen Hawking book, and Einstein. Didn't know what I was getting in for.
Right.
I was just talking about, relative theories and black holes, when most people had no ideas what those were. And I was reading these theoretical physics books, and I'm just realized that kind of messed me up with the future of my schooling, from the fact of I found things that mattered to me that were beyond the basics.
Right.
And I started not caring about, everything else. Like, the rest of science didn't really matter anymore. The rest of math, I wanted to focus on the theoretical stuff, because something that I didn't know at the time that I've come to learn now is I'm a top-down learner. So I need the answer first to be able to
figure out how it was attained.
To even care about how to. And it's when it comes to standardized everything, how can you prove that you learned something if you're given the answer first? So that's where I stumbled upon that I like to. Up until that point, I didn't know that. So I was okay learning the way that was taught in schools. Then when I learned that I like to have the answer first, that broke this whole paradigm of trusting in the information and then getting to the answer, and hopefully it's what you need.
Right. And that kind of comes back to the scientific process.
Absolutely.
From where you were reading that.
You have a theory, and you just,
exactly.
Then you test it out. You find the self-evident truth. And I was doing that with everything. So when I started to realize I was less and less interested in school, there was a lot of excuses made, like, it won't matter until you get into high school. That's all that matters if you want to get into college is high school. And I'm like, okay, well, I still want to go to MIT or Cal Poly. Yeah. If high school is all that matters. Then I get into high school, realize it's the same thing. Yeah. I care even less, want to do the homework even less, and get to the point where I get so disillusioned by the end of my freshman year from my sophomore, junior, and senior year. I went a cumulative of 100 days of high school.
Oh, wow.
Of all 3 of those years.
Yeah.
I just told this story for the first time publicly on my podcast, and it's just this 10-minute story where I go into it in detail, but save time here. Yeah. Just, if you want to hear the full story, go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the links will be in the description for all of your content. It's all the websites we talk about, as well as any of his social media links. You can just find that down in the description below.
Yeah. And this was just, I wasn't going to school pretty much. I probably, between 30 and 40 days each of those 3 years, I was in a classroom. The rest I was at home, either playing, games on the internet or learning on the internet. I was really big into MMOs at that time.
Same. But just out of curiosity, which one did you play?
I played Ragnarok, like nobody's business. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. See, I had a very widespread of MMO time. I was very much so the MMO nerd. I played World of Warcraft very heavily. I played Lord of the Rings Online. Yeah. That's a throwback. I played Star Wars The Old Republic. The KOTOR. I played KOTOR, then Star Wars The Old Republic. I used to be huge into MMOs for sure. I
remember when KOTOR 2 came out, and I was just so stoked. And then it came out with KOTOR Online. It was just it was Ragnarok Online. That was before they tried out different types of Ragnarok. It was just, we would play on I guess what would now be considered pirated servers. So it was just private servers. We did that a lot, and me and my friends. And that took up probably the majority of my time. And then when my friends weren't online, I was learning. And at this time, there was this little website that I thought was massive, but most people didn't really like it. What people think of the dark web today, they were considering this website to be the dark web of information. My sister wasn't even allowed to use this when she was going through college.
Just to clarify, is this website something that was on the dark web, or is this website just referred to?
No, it's still on the internet now. It's called Wikipedia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Nice.
Yeah, so it was during that, what I call Wikipedia startup phase, where they, had a big part of it was inconsistent, unfactual. Right. And then it improved over time. Unpaid communities started fact-checking the information more and more, and it had that exponential curve that we see often in startups, but with integrity of information. Right. So I utilized Wikipedia crossed with what I learned on the Discovery Channel and History Channel, and I dive deeper on Wikipedia, resources that I didn't have available to me even in the libraries at that time with books, and I would dive deep into that. And I also got into this other little website that most people were using to watch the history of dance, and I watched how-to and tutorial videos back then. Yeah. Everyone knows it now as YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite platforms. For sure.
Absolutely. And I was using it for educational purposes when people saw it as cat videos and history of dance.
I actually really connect with that. With the job that I have right now, I was able to clear out 8 hours a day by transitioning from the phones into creating the social media department, where we optimize Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, all that good stuff. And basically, by getting off of the phones, I cleared up that time where I don't have to talk to someone. So I can be listening to whatever I want to. Where everyone else is listening to music, I was like,
let's put up a watch later playlist and just learn everything that we need to know. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. Between, podcasts and YouTube videos that you can listen to passively, it's like we have all this time where we're doing like repetitive tasks that aren't stimulating our minds, that we can have anything stimulate
Exactly.
That's why this
question on the Wikipedia thing.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious. Do you think that because I know when I was in school, at least, they tried to bash Wikipedia for sure. Like, it was never use Wikipedia. It's not a credible source. You never know what's going to be on there. But the reality is, so if someone messes up and they put wrong information, it's probably going to be fixed like that because everyone is looking. Everyone's saying, wait, that's not right.
Yeah.
That's not the right information.
It has so many eyes on it now that you realize that something that used to be a result of government called oversight is possible with just the way the internet exists.
Right.
You can have the whole world have oversight over what's kind of a distributed version of a decentralized source of knowledge, like Wikipedia. And when you have that much oversight, back then it could go weeks, months, or years without getting fact checked.
Yeah,
now it can't last more than 48 hours.
Exactly. And that's more so what it was like when I was a kid, too. But it feels to me, also from hearing what you were talking about in your experience whenever you were in school, it feels to me like the schools are trying to keep that away. Like, they want to keep it centralized.
Yeah.
It seems to me like Wikipedia, they're pushing against it, not because of the credibility of the information, but because they want you to go to their information sources, not
absolutely.
ones that are available.
And that's not necessarily bad if they have the integrity of the knowledge. It's just what harm can come from having multiple knowledge sources clash against each other.
Some perspective.
Oh, for sure. And it's like if you follow the principle of anti-fragility, Taleb talks about this in his book Anti-Fragile quite brilliantly. It's like this happens with ideas too. With conflict comes, the purest form of survival. You have the strongest outcome. Just like, the more we harm our body through working out, you tear apart your muscles. It's like you grow strength by harm. And as biological creatures, we've got to realize that there are some things that are like living organisms, like Wikipedia, that becomes stronger over time in alignment with, the principle of anti-fragility. Anti-fragility. Right. It's a new word. Like, Taleb came up with that because he's like, we have, fragile and robust. And following my ideas of you have negative, neutral, and positive terminologies, he came up with a new terminology called anti-fragile, where robust just means it's hard to break. Anti-fragile means it can actually become stronger after it breaks. You see this a lot in Eastern philosophy where, if they break China, it's done. You can put it together, but it's never rebuild it with gold, because it's never quite the same. But it has this intrinsic beauty if they put it back together and they fuse it together with gold, and it has character in it. Yeah. Where it's like you have some cultures that try and mimic that because it becomes more valuable because not only has it broken, it's been somebody cared about it enough to put it back together, even enough to use gold to mend it. And I'm like, that's pretty interesting because that's how we are. We break and we build ourselves better with the knowledge of how we broke to build ourselves stronger.
Exactly. And, all of that even comes back down to entrepreneurial 101. It's you get punched in the face 100 times before that one time where you win that fight,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is something where, it's always been seen as, counter-logical, when really it's the same sort of logic that took off with startup funding. Yeah. Venture capitalists were seen as insane when it came to investing because, you want to have, a burnout, like a runway where you're just spending money and you don't care about quarterly or yearly returns for pretty much however long it takes. This was a radical idea. Right. But this is what happens whenever you're looking to make change and you care whether or not the results are positive or negative. Because negative results often provide short-term positive, but long-term degradation.
Right. Because you know what not to do, but if you keep doing those things, obviously you're going to start to see a decline in what.
Absolutely. Where you can have great results for the quarterly, yearly, and then you realize you can't keep that up in the long run. And, this is something that's become pretty widely accepted that it works in the world of tech.
Yeah.
But, you have Elon Musk trying to introduce it into so many different sectors from, automotive to space to, mass transit, with the Boring Company, Tesla, and, SpaceX. He's building an infrastructure of travel that really, competes with essentially consumable fuel sources to new renewable, sustainable fuel sources, even piggybacking on the current infrastructure to get it jump-started.
Yeah.
And you realize this infrastructure is what it takes, where he's using that startup model. People thought it didn't make sense with cars, and now it's at the point where it makes too much sense that they can't deny it anymore.
Exactly. Well, see, one of the things, I love Elon Musk and his business strategy. One of the things that he talks about a lot is he could very well have, with the finances that he could have just made a ton of cars and just put them all out there. And so here they are, like it or not. But instead, he's created this really smart tactic of slowly putting out cars and slowly putting them out. Because what happens is over a course of 5 years, when a new technology comes out, 5 years later, it's pretty integrated in life. You know, like as of right now, you go on YouTube and you look at some of the bigger people that, bigger YouTubers, bigger influencers across different platforms, celebrities. They're all driving Teslas right now because it's really efficient. It's gotten to be somewhat affordable for the mid to high range class of people. They're really working on a lot of things. They're trying to make it affordable and renewable. And those are two things that I think when you approach something with a passion for the outcome as opposed for a passion of the finances that might come out of that, I think that's where you see the difference.
It's impact versus profit. Exactly. And you realize that
it's like Gary Vee too. He's already made his money. He doesn't need you to make money. He doesn't need you to watch his content. He doesn't need you to do whatever. He's got an agency. He's got businesses. He's got all this. He knows how to go out and flip something and make a buck. He doesn't need your money. So he can provide content that doesn't require you to pay for it. And so it's like just purely value driven. I think that goes across the board with anyone. It's just passion.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Watching Gary Vee the past couple of years, I was just like, holy shit, where was this? 15 years ago when I would if I was like, this is the stuff that I had to learn to say to myself. Because, like I said, I was in high school, barely went to any of high school. Got to the point where it came down to I had to make a decision because I got to my senior year passively. I was still enrolled in school. I wasn't that wasn't where I was learning. I was learning at home. So when I took the pre-SAT, this is back when the SAT was a 1,600 point. Is it 1,600 or 1,400 now? I forget.
I think when I took it, it was 1,600.
Okay, so it used to be different, and I took it when it was. And I was about 200 points under, a perfect score at whatever that was at the time. And I just remember I went in there, I took the test in under an hour, and then I got called in with my parents a week later, and they asked me how I cheated on it. And I was like, what? I didn't cheat. And they're like, you haven't been to school long enough you haven't been here enough to get these right. And I'm like, well, I mean, I've been learning stuff at home on YouTube and Wikipedia, and imagine, a time before those were anything other than, legitimate sources of information. Some people, they still believe in you can't believe everything you see on the internet because they didn't learn how to question and be
Well, the internet didn't change the information that is in the world. It just created a window to see what was available.
It created abundance.
Exactly. Because what you have to realize is where people say, yeah, you can't trust everything you read on the internet. Sure, that's true, but you can't trust anything that you hear from some random stranger in the street either.
Absolutely.
If I come and walk up to you and give you this weird, crazy theory, like I can have a website that it's the same thing that I'm telling you. It's just on a wider distribution scale, and other people can more easily stumble on it instead of me having to reach out and tell you my crazy theory. So I don't think that it's necessarily corrupted the information or made it where it's
people have just forgotten how to verify any information.
Because it quickens the pace. It's not that it's not any different. It just makes it faster. Instead of you having to give it to me having to receive it and then give you my interpretation, you just put it out there and I see it when I see it. And maybe I respond, maybe I don't. But like that's how the internet is working. It creates a transparency of information.
Because there are efficient ways to fact check any information you get. Most people are just so used to asking a trusted source that if you learn about something where you don't have a trusted source on it, how are you going to fact check it?
Right.
I had to figure this out by accident with Napster back in the day, before Napster was a taboo word. And it was just a way to get music.
Right.
And I remember first using Napster, and when I first used it, I first discovered the chat room, and I was like, who is LOL? It's like, and then once I figured out that LOL was actually not a person, it was laugh out loud, I moved on to the main feature of Napster.
Right.
And I started downloading music, and I realized I don't know much about music, and I started, downloading anything I could about Dragon Ball Z at the time, like all the soundtrack. I'm like, oh shit, this is a Japanese show. It's like, oh, there's Japanese music. Interesting. It's like, and then I got into, any bands that I could think to download. My father was really into the Beatles, so I downloaded all the Beatles. I
love the Beatles.
And that's an interesting story of how I learned to fact check, because for years I was listening to the Beatles on the computer and the MP3 player that I bought. And I remember when my dad got some CDs of the Beatles, and he got 3 albums. He got Revolver, Rubber Soul, and he got Yellow Submarine.
Hey!
And that was the one where I remember listening to it with him, and I'm like, first off, I was like, this is different than the order of songs on my Win It playlist. I'm like, this is interesting. They flow together very nicely. No,
me and my fiance actually just watched Yellow Submarine.
Oh, great one.
She's never seen it before. So we went and watched it. Oh my God, I love the Beatles, dude.
It is great. I
actually have Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, the album. I have it in mint condition from the original release, actually, on vinyl.
Wow,
that's one of my favorite vinyls in my collection that I actually have.
It's great to sit down and listen to these whole collections of work. I like the distributed method of distribution of songs that has happened with this EDM revolution. But there is something to be said that when there is a collection of works that can go together of individual songs, that's what makes a musical great, or a rock opera, or an opera. It's a story. Absolutely.
What I like to think of it, and any musicians that are listening to this, feel free to take advantage of this advice and move forward with your writing. The number one thing to creating a great album, in my opinion, as a musician and someone who's been in marketing for a while now, is think of it like a movie. If you can create a 1 to 1.5 hour movie and split it by scene into 5-minute scenes, you will have a masterpiece on your hands. Because you will have thought of that album from the beginning of the experience to the end of the experience. And people don't recognize that those numbers, those likes, those follows, that listen, that engagement, those are people. Every single one of those numbers, that is an actual person who decided to take time out of their day to listen to the story that you had in whatever form you put that out there.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the number one thing. If you want to be successful with almost anything, think of it from the start to the finish, and then see how you can kind of get there. It's like what you said with how you learn things. You can't build something successful if you don't know what your end goal is.
Absolutely. And it even came down to that point where it's like, I didn't see the big picture when I was using Napster at that point. It's like the internet was new. How to fact check my own information was new. And I remember sitting down to listen to these these CDs, these albums with my father and the way that he did when he was young. And they would get the new Beatles CD and they would just listen to it completely, not doing anything else, not on their phone, like listen to the collection of work. And I listened to this with him. And I remember listening to Yellow Submarine with him. And I brought this story up with him recently, and he does not even remember it. But it was so vivid to me where I was like, oh, this is an extended version of Yellow Submarine. He's like, what is this kid talking about? And I was trying to explain to him the difference between the extended version and radio cut. Like, I thought I was so smart discovering these things with Napster, the difference between radio edits and extended cut. And he's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like, wait, there's multiple versions?
And he was like, no, this is Yellow Submarine. And I was so determined that I was right that, like, afterwards I went onto the computer, listened to Yellow Submarine, the song that I had known for a couple of years at that point, and I was like, I knew it. What we're listening to is an extended version. And I was like so determined to prove it to him, I proved myself wrong.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, I downloaded all the other, like, I tried to find Yellow Submarine extended and not extended, and I was like, they're not specifying. I downloaded all of them that I could, and I realized, okay, these are all the version that he was listening. These are all the extended version. And then I was like trying to figure out what was wrong. And I scrolled down to the download history to the first version of Yellow Submarine that I downloaded. And I noticed something. The file size that it said that it downloaded was different than the one on the hard drive. I had been listening to a minute and 45, 50-second version of Yellow Submarine right from that transition where they're on the submarine to the next. And I was like, I had been listening to a shorter version of, like, my reality was that was the complete version, and then I realized there was more to it.
So you're like, wait, there's a whole half of this song that I didn't know about?
What? And I was like, holy cow. And I'm like, that's when I realized that being wrong is an opportunity to discover more truth. And then years later, when more people started using the internet, thanks to people like Steve Jobs, who was like, let's get everyone to want to use a computer. Let's get everyone to want to use the internet with the iMac. I'm like, people started saying, when I would say, I learned this and this, where'd you learn it? And then they would say, don't believe everything you see on the internet. And I'm like, yeah, no shit. Like, why are you bringing that up? That's an obvious. It's like I've verified this, double verified it, triple verified it, because I learned how to do that effectively.
Exactly. And just if you would, like, quickly, what is your process? Just, what if you'll touch on that, what is your process for fact checking your information? Is it similar to what I would do, or is just you find as much information as you can to see where the congruencies lie, or like what is your process for fact checking?
My process is it sounds a lot more complicated when I explain it, but I find I do a quick Google search to see how many other sources talk about it in a headline, easy to summarize way. Number one, I see how many people are talking about it, and then I do a quick overview of all of those sources. So it's not any different than what most people do to verify their information. It just sounds really time consuming.
Oh yeah, it definitely is time consuming.
At first.
And then you get used to it.
You get used to it. And that's what I realized is by the time people said, years after I had been practicing this, knowing no other way to question it, people were like, you don't believe everything you see on the internet. I was like, okay, people aren't used to doing this. And I realized I had gotten to the point where I didn't know that it was difficult. And I got to the point where it was automatic. And I'm like, it can get to that point to anyone. It's just, if we look at how difficult it is for the first few months, first few years, we tend to give up and go back to a different way of doing it that doesn't work with abundance of data and information.
Generally, what I do whenever it's very similar, actually. I do a very similar thing. Is as some of you may know, around 86% of the most relevant and popular searches are going to be within the first 5 results on Google. That's just because of the way that they cache information. So if you're very specific with the way that you ask your question or word your query, then you get really detailed results.
Oh, absolutely.
So what I like to do is you take a positive position at first, right? And you look up something that is a positive query of whatever it is that you're looking for. And then I take the first 5 results and I read through those websites, get the information, right? Then I do the same thing, but for negative. Like, so I want to see the bad side of it. Like, what is the people that are trying to tear it down? Like, what is the other side of it? And then you read 5 of those. And there's going to be some congruency between those two. So you'll see where the fact lies. You see where the opinion is, because they have passionate opinion, and then their passionate opinion, but in a negative way, trying to tear them down. Yeah. And then in between is where the actual fact of what they're doing is.
Yeah. You find the neutral ground and you figure out what the actual truth is somewhere in between. This is something that's often explained to people as a great way to figure out how to read reviews on Amazon or Yelp. You look at the good ones and the bad ones, and you find the truth in between. The fact of the matter is it's the same for any information.
Oh, yeah. Well, with reviews, the easiest way to do it, if they have multiple pages, is just find the middle of where the good reviews are. Yeah. Because the first couple of ones are going to be generated like bot-generated stuff, more than likely. Yeah. It's going to be kind of more fake for the first couple of results. But if you go past like 10 reviews and you actually go to the next page, those are more usually authentic.
Yeah. And especially even with the negative ones, it's like when you read the negative reviews, it's important to understand, would I care about, like when you read why these people left a negative, would I care if I ran into, is that problem important enough to me that it should matter?
Yeah, and you also have to fact check negativity. People oftentimes are very fast to fact check the positive, the good information that they see, but they forget to fact check the negative stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much hate in social media and online with people talking, is because you hear something negative, and instead of checking to see where the actual result of that action is, to see what you should be mad about, you just automatically jump on and
it's a
agree
negative
with what it is.
reaffirmation, honestly. And fear spreads more than any other plague in mankind. And when we're all digitally connected, the whole world can be infected in a matter of minutes.
Exactly.
So it's the best thing to question is fear. I started working on that process about 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, very seriously. And I remember I was given 2 books to read by a friend that I looked up to at that time for the successes that I thought I wanted, and became friends with him for the way he understood himself that I desperately wanted. Right. And he gave me 2 books to read back then. One of them was Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. The other one was The 50th Law by Robert Greene and 50 Cent.
I don't think I've read that, but I'm pretty sure I've heard some quotes from that one before. Yeah.
I'd have to say that Mastery is my favorite Robert Greene book, because that's one that I read. I read that, and then The Art of Seduction, and
that's a good one.
It's just I didn't read 48 Laws of Power. I read I watched an hour-long review synopsis of it, but it's his books are amazing. Like, it's funny that the book that got him where he is, I haven't read, but Mastery, and I consider that his magnum opus. He comes out with a new book that I'm really excited about in October. But I finally read 50th Law a few months ago, and I'm like, why didn't I read this one first? It addresses fearlessness like all of his other books address, with somebody real, and I'm like, these people exist today. And it's not just the anomalous cases like 50 Cent. It's like any of us can achieve that. If we compare ourselves, like, we could never have what he has, we need to realize, is that even what we truly want? Can we still have the fearlessness without having a gun pulled on us? Can we address our idea of death, which might not be life or death? Our new version of death in a society which keeps death secret in abstract could be, running out of money, not being able to pay rent, being alone, not having a girlfriend, not having a boyfriend, not having friends. Like, we redefine what death is.
That's very true. That's a good. I like that. That's a very interesting perspective. Like, I'm just sitting, my gears are turning. I'm like, ooh, I like that. That's really cool.
It becomes easier and easier to see these things the more we let ourselves switch over from this social norm of different is bad and how are we different from one another.
Right.
I, forced myself for a while until it became more and more automatic to how am I alike? How do I only care about how I am alike to someone? It's not that I'm ignoring the differences. They're just not apparent.
Right.
I can stop and see how we're different.
Yeah.
I just don't care enough about it to focus on.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things where I think it kind of comes down to perspective. It's like you can choose to be what's the way that this phrase goes? I don't know if you're familiar with Cody Wanner, but he's a pretty popular up and coming influencer on YouTube right now, making consistent vlogs, and he's recently gone from around like 10,000 to he's nearing like up into like the 50,000s right now, like really quickly because of the way that he's putting out consistent content. And one of the things that he talked about that I really, really, really enjoyed is he talks about joy and happiness and how they're two different things. Yeah. A lot of people, they go out and they look for happiness, but the reality is happiness is an emotion. It's a chemical reaction inside of your body that gives you a feeling. Joyfulness is the choice to be positive, the choice to look at the good outcome, the choice to look at the better alternative. Yeah. So I really think it all comes down to the perspective is, are you going to be joyful? Are you going to choose?
Guys, it stopped. Hold on. I gotta pick back up.
That's fine. So with joyfulness is, are you going to choose to be happy, to choose to pursue positivity, or are you going to choose to be enveloped by the negativity? Are you going to let that influence you and let that tear you down ultimately?
I agree. This is something where I'm realizing that science and medicine has not quantified positive, negative, and neutral results in the ways that they study up until recently. And I'm realizing that being able to quantify those things are the difference between getting short-term results and long-term disaster. This is probably the main focus of the whole point of my nonprofit work with the decentralized education, focusing in, number one, how to educate oneself, and also implementing in tandem with that mental health in a way where it integrates positive, neutral, and negative mental health in the way where it separates those so that mental illness is no longer the fuel. If you follow the second and third laws of Newton and thrust, it's like if we're thrusting ourselves to mental health, and the only thing psychologically apparent is mental illness, whether or not you have mental illness becomes the failure point. Right. And I'm like, no, even the mentally ill, when they go to a doctor and they want to get psychiatric help or psychological help, it gets to the point where they are learning how to navigate their own brain chemistry so that they can start practicing mental health.
Absolutely. See, I actually very much so connect with that. Yeah. For me, I've never been diagnosed, so I don't know what exactly I have, mostly because of the fact this is for me personally. I don't recommend that people just follow this advice, but for me personally, I've always been scared that I would be told that I had something that in my mind I couldn't overcome.
Oh, absolutely.
So instead of getting that diagnosis and seeing where I lie, I've just kind of dealt with the issues that I have. And I deal with really intense anxiety, really intense depression, very frequently, and obviously being a creator, that's something very frequent that a lot of creators have to deal with. But when I was growing up, I figured it out. I figured out, like I was saying, the difference between joy and happiness is I've always been a joyful person, and I've always made that decision that, sure, I can spend my time being negative. I can spend my time being dark, and I can come up with really bad things that'll pull other people around me down. But what does that give me? That just gives me more negativity. The way that I like to live my life is I call it living for my future self, right? So that's kind of like the way that I scope it, is that when I wake up tomorrow morning, I want to be able to wake up and say, thanks, past Michael, you really helped me out. Today is a lot easier than yesterday was. Or when I woke up this morning and I had to set all this stuff up, this is just a prime example. I had to actually put in the work and the effort to set the studio up. One of my long-term goals is to have a studio that is done, and I can just say, I'll meet you at this studio at this time, and I just roll up and record.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like eventually past Michael will have done the work to make that happen.
You
So
build the infrastructure.
Exactly. So one day I'm going to wake up and say, hey, thanks for making this happen. My life is a lot easier than it was last year. So, you know, I think that it's all about choices and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Because if you're building an infrastructure, you realize that, you know, doing it this way, which is very similar to the startup model, you have two options. You either spend a lot up front, either time, money, or energy, to get the ideal now, and then you need consumers versus fans.
Yep.
And that's the dilemma that, you know, we're facing. It's, do we need consumers or do we need fans? What's the balance? That's why I like Gary Vee's message where it's, you know, go for the fans, for the fans and give it time. Because that's, you know, time is something, it's become this construct where when we measure it, it becomes more negative than it does positive. Time exists whether or not we observe it or we don't.
Yeah, it's still there. It's still ticking. You can be asleep and have no knowledge of time, but it's still going.
Yep. Because what it comes down to is we're all in the same place at different points in our life.
Right.
And that's what I like about, you know, Gary Vee's message where he's like, you know, keep doing what you want to be doing 5 years now. Even if it doesn't look like you want it to do, build that infrastructure, find your people.
Yeah. Well, see, what people don't realize is when you separate, one of the biggest things that Gary talks about is when you build fans, what you should be doing is realizing a way where you can financially support yourself and financially support your passion outside of the base that is consuming the content.
Yeah.
So what that does is you don't owe me anything by listening to this.
Yeah.
You don't have to give me anything. You don't even owe me your attention to listen to the whole thing. Yeah. I am constantly providing value and providing reasons that assist you and make it worth your time.
Yeah.
Because ultimately there are millions and millions and millions of creators online right now. Yeah. And if for 1 second you lose someone's attention because you start focusing on how to make a profit off of them as opposed to what you can provide for them, you're going to immediately lose your audience. And it is so much harder to get someone new into your audience and to get that person to come back than it is to just keep doing what you're doing and let that build. And because ultimately you only need around 1,000 really supportive people following your work online. That's it.
The law of 1,000. Yeah, law of 1,000 fans. I absolutely believe that. And what that comes down to is, you know, I didn't even used to believe that. I don't even know if I actually believe that anymore, as much as I know that there's no other ways that work in digital space other than that, where, you know, in our physical reality, land is the ultimate real estate. Like that is the ultimate vessel of wealth, where in digital space, it's attention. Attention is the new real estate. And Gary talks about that all the time, where attention is the currency that it's like, you know, you measure it instead of, you know, by numbers, numbers of currency, you measure it by time.
Exactly.
Attention is the currency that makes or breaks people in digital space. It's no longer a land grab, it's an attention grab. And you realize now there's a war of ideologies between the ideology of consumerism and fans, which completely conflicts with that ideology. It's almost anti-ideology. Where you just essentially want decentralized friends. You want friends everywhere. It doesn't matter if you've met them in person, they just understand you. What you realize, that's the whole movement going on, that it's whether or not it's with the LGBTQ plus communities or the Black Lives Matter communities or Blue Lives Matter, any of these communities, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter if you see them as positive or negative. People want to be understood. And as a society, it's almost seeming like we've forgotten how to understand other people because we don't know how to give our attention to that long enough to not get frustrated by how much hard fucking work it is.
Yeah, because building a relationship is not easy.
No.
It takes time. And that's why when you look at influencers and people that are building brands and channels for themselves, you don't learn everything there is to know about them in that one experience.
No.
You know, we're having a podcast right now, but you're going to learn things about me with the next guest that we won't even talk about in this section because it just didn't come up in a 90-minute period. It's like, and if you're basing your opinion off of a 5-minute video instead of a 90-minute podcast, you know, it's like, how are you going to do, if you can't even generalize who I am based on a 90-minute podcast, how are you going to do that with a 5-minute video or less?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that one of the biggest reasons, too, to continually put out that consistency and keep it value-driven as well is it creates brand loyalty. Because at the end of the day, you don't have to directly sell your products to people. If you are putting your passions out there and you're showing how you do it, one of the things that Gary talks about is that I don't remember the exact statistic, but around 90% or higher of the people that literally could watch you teach them and train them step by step on how to exactly replicate what you do won't take any action.
Yeah.
Because the majority of them, they don't have the time to do that. They don't understand the technical things that go into that. They want to see that you understand it by you doing it and showing them that value. So,
and that's honestly like how I built a career out of consulting. It's I understood how to do actionable things step by step that people are more than capable to do for themselves. Most of the times they're ideas that they give me and I just have the follow through to help them make it happen for themselves.
Exactly.
But what I realized is like I'm just so tired of, you know, not even capitalism, but capitalizing on this one. I'm like, I wish I could franchise this in a way where, and then I started looking into decentralized philosophy.
Right.
I've been interested with cryptocurrency for years and realized when you remove the currency from crypto, what is left? And I realized it's all these protocols of exchanges of value.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you set aside the idea of money, that exchange of value can look so differently. It could look like public services. It could look like government. It could look like school. It doesn't have to be something for money,
right?
Like we've gotten used to with cryptocurrency.
Well, the thing is, too, is that that whole consumerism and things having to be worth money has only really been around for 1,000 years or so.
Yeah.
When you look at history, like at a point in time, people were doing exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And they were trading information. They were trading tactics. They were trading things that they had learned. You know, that's how people worked. But right now, we live in this wonderful place, where, in my opinion, where immediately that interaction takes place. Instead of you having to travel 100 miles to get to a meeting spot for you to potentially have something that's worth what I have, and you want what I have and I want the information you have, maybe there's interaction that takes place. With the internet, it's immediate. I need that information. You have that information. You need my attention. Here's my attention. Give me that information.
Location is removed from the equation.
Exactly.
When you see how that can advance human relationships,
Because if I don't have to put in the time, to train each and individual person, I can put in everything I have into 1 hour.
Right now.
Right now, everything that I have into 1 hour. And then every single person can consume that same hour the exact same way. Instead of me having to dedicate, because there's only so many hours in a day, and I'm only going to live so long. So if I have to physically give you my hour for you to get that information, I am by definition limiting the reach that I can have in my lifetime.
Absolutely. Yeah, so true.
So one of the things that we kind of touched on with some of the projects that you have coming up, I know you have the Library of Consciousness and then the other project that you have that's in the works right now. We were talking about like information and trading and how it kind of goes back to that era. One of the things that I really, really liked that you told me in our pre-production meeting is how you're mixing branding and content distribution to kind of go back to that, Library of Alexandria era where information was there and we had everything we needed to know to be able to progress as a society.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because we've gotten into an era where you realize that, like you said just a moment ago, where this exchange of value has been going on for thousands of years, and it's really started to escalate with an exponential curve once we started the first industrial revolution. We're in the third industrial revolution now. Jeremy Rifkin talks about the state of the world with the third industrial revolution. That shift But you start to realize that this exchange, money has gotten in between all exchanges.
Yep.
It's the middleman that's in every single exchange of value. And you start to realize it wasn't always like that, but that has been necessary for things to grow exponentially in the way where before it was trade and barter. Now trade and barter can happen with the internet in a way like it's never been possible before, where it looks just like Craigslist, Facebook, eBay, Amazon, but you have trade and barter in a way where money is removed from the equation, and it works in a way that's so familiar that you realize that that was just a credit system. Yeah. And you can remove that with instant digital communication in a way that's never been possible before.
Yeah.
I think that money just eliminates it. Basically, it's when you get money, you're not trading for value at that moment and what you need to progress at that moment. You're saying, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I want. So I'm just going to get this currency so that maybe later on I can figure it out and trade it for what that is.
It was a very analog version of what I call the internet of exchange. And then you start to realize we can have an internet of anything right now. Right now, most people consider the internet to be what we know the internet to be. But just the same way Elon Musk is building the internet of charging stations for electric cars, we can have the internet of anything. Like Facebook has become the internet of social communities. Right. It's become the internet of democracy, quite literally. And you start to realize, like, if we had a real, true internet of exchange, a decentralized exchange that removes the for-profit model where, right now the most decentralized exchanges we have are exchanges that still have a token, something that you can invest. Yeah. I'm like, what if people remove that? That's such a paradigm shift that usually breaks some people's brains. Yeah. And this is the sort of thing, like, this is probably one of the biggest things we want to work on in the long term. But we give this idea, like, this is our $1 billion idea that you don't make any money from owning, but it levels the playing field for anyone. So I'm happy to share it. If anyone wants to build it before we do, that's more than fine. Like, that's the whole point.
It's like, oh, sweet, we can make it happen faster. Let's go. Let's do it.
It's exactly why, the whole the new Library of Alexandria movement that we're trying to do, which is the same thing where a truly decentralized exchange could revolutionize Wall Street, every single type of investment that's being challenged by startup type funding, crowdfunding in a way where that could challenge everything. Right. If it's addressed to Wall Street, we want to address the way centralization has lasted for thousands of years, done a lot of good, a lot of bad too, but it happens. And we realize decentralization with education can cut out the authorities, put education in the hand of teachers. No teacher has any more say than any other teacher. Yeah. You realize all information is equal. We are able to teach people how to be self-reliant and how they fact check themselves. Right. How they, just seek out their own truth. And even if it's different than the truth if my truth is different than your truth, it doesn't make it any less true for you if it provides the results that you're looking for. Exactly. Plain and simple. It's
at the end of the day, it's just a search for happiness. Yeah. And you need information to get you to the place where you can be happy.
Yeah. Because so many people are intoxicated by chasing happiness. Yeah. That they don't stop to think, if I were to make myself happy right now with only the ingredients I have, if I were to MacGyver this shit and make happiness now, what would that take? Right. And they don't stop to do that and realize that if you're going to be happy, you need to innovate on what's making you happy now rather than making it what's on the other side of the fence. Exactly. Because once you get there, the grass is greener on the next fence, and you always want to be moving.
Exactly. You know, I can actually speak and attest to that just with my own creative process.
Yes.
Whenever I was in high school, I used to make videos using a webcam.
Yeah.
Because we were really poor, didn't really have much money to be able to buy a camera or anything. And smartphones were not very good at the time. It wasn't even 1080p yet. So it's like, it was bad. And I wasn't going to put out bad quality because that's just the way I am. But I would make these videos using a webcam or just whatever source that I could get. And I found that at the time, all I wanted to have and all I wanted to be doing is what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Where I upgraded to where I had a nice phone or something, or I had like a nice portable, nice camera that I could go places with, and lighting and audio, and just having the tools that I need to produce the quality that I want. Now that I'm here, I want a real camera, a real DSLR, so that I don't have to deal with issues that go into a phone, and I don't have to deal with this and that. I want to upgrade my computer. And it's like every time you get to a new level, things become easier and you can do more. But then, like you said, there's always another level, another layer of intricacy, because we're not the only ones innovating.
No.
You don't, like, just because you are pushing forward and doing things to get to a certain goal, the people that make that thing that you're getting as a goal, they are also innovating.
Yes.
So when you finally get there, the bar is forward.
Yeah.
Once you finally get to be able to have that laptop, there's already 3 new laptops that are out.
It's so true. So true. And what it comes down to is you find the value in what you can get your hands on now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get fans of the idea, you can improve on it and improve everyone's situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that the fastest way to building a legacy and the fastest way to building any brand is by building up those that are around you.
Yeah.
And that's honestly the biggest thing that I'm trying to kind of to get as a goal or outcome from the podcast is that really I just like highlighting what people are doing. I think it's really cool. Like this whole thing that you have going on, like from the fact that it's based in your life and it's based from your, your upbringing and like your high school and your learning experience, and you're actually trying to help people that are like you to not have to deal with the issues that you had to deal with.
Yeah.
That's the reason I made my video series.
Yeah.
It's sharing the anxieties and the mental issues that I deal with on a daily basis, but then how have I been able to overcome them? Because I did something. I'm working from home. I have built a social media department. I have a podcast. I'm doing a video series. Like I've got all these really cool things, and I'm really happy. So it's like, how did I get there? Because 2 years ago I was not that person. I was not in that place.
Yeah, so. I hear you, because if we're going to start building something good for ourselves and other people, we need to start, understanding ourselves first, and that's kind of why my proof of concept within the New Library of Alexandria project is the Library of Consciousness, where this, you can find that at libraryofconsciousness.com or theeducationaldarkweb.com.
Right.
That's a play on branding as well. If you can figure out why we chose the educational dark web, you can understand why we're trying to share, just have ideas we're sharing.
Yeah.
And not always ideas that are even acceptable. Like I've seen a lot of these ideas censored by TED. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's really discouraging, because I was very encouraged when TED became popular. I'm like, this is huge. Sure. And now I'm realizing that some of the ideas that have helped me the most the past few years completely counter to everything, doing things right, the way that I had, almost been trained to do things that weren't providing results for me.
Right.
When really I haven't started doing things wrong. I just realized I had to do things wrong even at a minute level, just long enough for me to gain that personal evidence to keep up the consistency.
Right.
I was trying to do too much high level right when I had to figure out my own way to almost hack my life to the point where I could start doing it right again, where it didn't mean I had to go out raping, pillaging, murdering people to understand why I had value in human life or my own life. I just had to experiment with things on a level where I challenged my own beliefs, where I wasn't harming myself or others, and got to the point where I learned the lesson that I had been told, no, just trust us that this is right.
Right.
It wasn't internalized. I didn't believe it even though I wanted to believe it.
Right.
That's the whole point of why, if the new Library of Alexandria is the big idea for education, the cryptocurrency, then libraryofconsciousness.com is my Bitcoin. I don't expect it to be, the top dog on the new Library of Alexandria. I expect it to at least inspire people to be like, this is what I used to expand my consciousness so that I stopped having the anxiety, the depression, all the things that I had learned were going to need to be my life was somebody who was diagnosed with bipolar. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, I had accepted that so much that nothing else became real. A life without depression, without anxiety was unbelievable. Right. So I put together this source of information that I've collected over the past decade of videos, documentaries available on YouTube. I put them in this Facebook social learning platform in the groups. You click on the discussions tab, you're in a normal Facebook group. Units tab, you're in a free course on Facebook. Videos freely available on YouTube. I'm hoping they won't get censored, but they're safe in my group. If they do, they point back to wherever the creators are also on the internet. They're so using branding to link these together. Yes, I'm sharing things without their permission, but it's always pointing. I'm not saying it's mine. Right.
It's creating a
branding.
What's the word? Like in the old Greek times, the people that would it's curating.
Curating and citing. It absolutely is that, and it got to the point where I realized that not everything that I learned was available on YouTube. I have 2 playlists. If you find me on YouTube, or the movement on YouTube right now, it's Talking in a Library, spelled LBRY. A shout out to the library platform, which is a great distributed or decentralized distribution of media, digital media. I love it. They cut out all the middlemen, but you can make it just like YouTube. You can make it just like Netflix, like iTunes. It's up to the creator. It's empowering creators in a way that cuts out even the need for copyright laws. And it's just mind-blowing at how it protects the creator, where it's proof that they came out with it. Undeniable proof. But it also, it's branded. It's free. It's branding. They can get paid, however tipped. No middlemen. And I love that.
I think that's really important. The way that you're spreading knowledge and spreading that base, especially moving into AI with the world that we're living in. A lot of people don't realize that 100 years ago, when they started when they started the Industrial Revolution, and that they had these assembly lines and all of that. The goal of that, the whole reason of the robotic technology, was so that people didn't have to go to work. But then people got greedy and realized, wait a second, you can do your 8 hours of work in 2 hours. Cool, I'm going to make 4 times the profit. Right. And so instead of saying, okay, cool, you can just work 2 hours a day and focus on what's important to you, it's okay, no, we're going to keep making you work 8 hours, but we're going to just get 4 times the results because we've gotten better. Absolutely. I think that as information gets out there, I think that it's super, super, super important for what you're doing to let people understand that creative mindset, because ultimately, you can really not want AI. You can really be against it. You can hate it. You can think that it's not going to be successful, but ultimately it's there. It's already there. It's already powering your devices. It's already gathering information. And it's just like the iPhone. 10 years ago, there were people that said they would never buy an iPhone, never buy a smartphone, never have that in their pockets. Guess what? If you never bought one, then you're really far behind. And I really doubt that you're getting the success you want, because you're not connecting with the audience where they're at.
And it's this epic struggle where you see the hierarchies of power. Jordan B. Peterson talks about this law. A lot is these natural hierarchies of power, and people think power is bad. No. Power can come across in 2 different ways. Either you're empowered, or you seek control. And control, like control corrupts power, absolutely.
Yeah.
Seeking control corrupts your power, absolutely.
Power corrupts, absolutely.
If you are empowered, you look to empower other people.
Yeah.
Just the same way, you know. Elon Musk is not looking to become the number one car manufacturer in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if he got out of car manufacturing one day. Once the debt model of economics is completely compromised, and then, you know, Ford, Chevy, Kia, all these car companies come together and they realize, okay, we don't have to sign people on for, you know, loans. We can do this fundraising type. And you realize he would just be probably at that point the number one battery manufacturer.
I totally agree. I think
self-driving cars.
I personally think, and it is on the record, so if it ends up happening, I was right.
Yeah.
But I personally think that the future, like 10, 20 years from now, I don't think car ownership is going to be a thing. I personally don't own a car. I sold it because I live in Southern California. I'm 3 miles away from where I work, and I take my boosted board every day.
Yeah.
And I say I don't pay for gas. I don't pay for insurance. I don't harm the planet.
Yeah.
And if I need to go somewhere further, there's Uber.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes back to where I was saying with AI. I personally do believe that AI is going to eventually do most of the meaningless like production everyday tasks.
Oh, absolutely. Humans are horrible natural statisticians.
Exactly.
We need them. Yeah.
And I think that it's really important that people have resources like what you're putting out so that they can get their mind right. Because when the world changes and there's not a reason for you to go to work anymore, what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah.
You know, whenever people switch from being farmers to going into the cities to get a job, we have to
Thanks
do
to
that.
The Industrial Revolution.
Now we have to do that in reverse.
Yeah.
So we have to go from having a job, not to necessarily being farmers, but to finding what it is that we're passionate about.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we will die as people, like not physically, you know, you won't like wither up and just die, but mentally your heart, your passion will die if you have nothing to focus on.
Absolutely. I mean, with the rise of the Industrial Revolutions, society realized we needed more and more computers.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have computers back then. Computing used to be a human job. I mean, even when computers became more and more popular as we know them, they still had human computers fact check all the stuff that the computers did for, you know, NASA back in the day. That's something that you start to realize is computers were, you know, a job, just like, you know, taxi drivers are a job now that's being replaced by more automation. Right. And it's computers used to be that. And you realize that human computers have been around for millennia. Mm-hmm. And we've gotten into this transition where now we have this society that's trained certain people to be really good computers. Right. And as electronic computers become more and more sufficient, they can replace more and more of those human computing jobs. Right. And what is left over is more room for creativity, for imagination, for innovation. And what it comes down to is I think that most people, I call them Skynetters, where they're afraid that computers, and especially artificial intelligence, if we get to superficial artificial intelligence, that we get to a point where computers are self-aware. That's the ultimate fear with Skynetters is self-aware computers. I'm like, intelligence never led me to self-awareness. Exactly. Emotional intelligence did. Yeah, exactly. And I think that is definitely one of the things that people forget is why would a device that we create that, because people forget it's essentially Siri, it's essentially Bixby, but with more availability to do different things, put into a different system with a different voice. But ultimately, no matter how sophisticated AI gets, it is still programmed by a person. Oh, yeah. And why would But the imaginative part of the person. Exactly. But their right brain uses their left brain to program this computer, and all CPUs are modeled after the left brain. Exactly. Unless we ever came up with an emotional processor, which you see in some science fiction movies, and if you had, you know, the CPU versus a CEU, a central emotional unit, to process. Even that would be programmed. That would be programmed. You would have to tell it how to react to certain things in order to build that emotion complex. So it's still not a human, because with people, no one tells me how to react
to something. If you yell at me, one person might get mad and punch you in the face, but the other might break down and cry. There was no one that told that human how to react or programmed them on how to react. And it could be different every single time.
Because computers, they follow protocols absolutely.
Yeah.
The difference between left brain and right brain is a left brain learns, it's not okay to hit people. Mm-hmm. The right brain understands sometimes it is.
Right.
And finding that balance is the difference between, defending yourself and not defending yourself.
Exactly.
And this is the thing where I don't think we'll ever live to see a society where computers could become self-aware. So I'm like, it's not important to me to avoid self-aware. I probably disagree with that even on someone I admire like Elon Musk. He probably understands a lot more about artificial intelligence than I can comprehend yet as being one of the thought leaders on it. Maybe I'm missing something.
True.
I don't know what I don't know.
Exactly.
But I know that emotional intelligence, if somehow if you could get a computer that was self-aware and they could understand emotional intelligence, then just like how some of the most self-aware people have figured out a way to turn their hyper-intelligence into a tool instead of it weaponizing itself against them, because my intelligence, my memorized knowledge, my data in my brain was my worst enemy when I didn't know who I was, because anyone could manipulate that.
Exactly, yeah.
That's why libraryofconsciousness.com, why I dropped the. You might still see it in some of the original banners, is because it's not the Library of Consciousness.
Right.
It's my Library of Consciousness.
Right. It's
all the data that I used to challenge my own beliefs. Some of the things in that library I don't believe in. Like there's a lot of stuff in there that's, I believe is metaphysical or pseudoscience or straight up conspiracy. But I like the fact that it has at least even just 1% of an idea that I'm like, this is the 1% that I was missing. Yeah. That was without it was breaking my idea.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I'll take this whether or not I think it's, in a whole, a bad piece of information. Yeah. This is the one piece I need to create a positive solution.
Exactly. It's like Walmart. Yeah. I don't like Walmart overall as a company, but you know what? Whenever I need some cheap chips, guess where I'm going?
It's convenience.
I'm not. I don't exactly. I don't care about all the other stuff that you have. Yeah. What I do know is that you have one thing that I need. Yeah. So I can come and I can get that one thing and leave the rest on the shelf. Yeah. I don't have to come and take the whole grocery store.
Absolutely. And that's kind of this concept of, control versus empowerment. It's like Walmart is okay empowering you as long as you don't have as much control as they do.
Exactly, yeah.
I really admire people like Elon Musk, Gary Vaynerchuk, Nassim Taleb, who, interesting thing about figuring out how we're wrong and learning to improve ourselves. I just got on Twitter about 2 months ago for the first time.
Oh, wow.
I was adapting from everything I knew from Facebook and other social media platforms to Twitter.
It's a very different.
I didn't understand how the tagging thing worked, and I was like, realized pretty quickly, like, understanding Taleb from his book, I was treating everyone on there like my friends on Facebook, and I'm realizing it's you got to have a different barrier.
Exactly.
Taleb being one of the controversial, he's. I understand how he is because I relate to it where it's like conflict oriented. That's a good way to get rapid results.
Oh yeah.
And especially
stance, and that's how you get visibility.
Yeah. I was sharing all of these things that I was like, I know people would appreciate, but nobody knows how to appreciate me. And I didn't understand how this tagging thing was working, and I was tagging everyone. Yeah. And I was like, Robert Greene, Gary V, like an individual post, and like Taleb, and it got to the point where I started to question whether or not that was the right way to behave on Twitter.
Right.
Because I realized when looking through somebody's follower who was liking certain things, I realized Taleb had liked one of their things.
Yeah.
And I realized that I wasn't connected with him, and I wondered, and he had blocked me, and I was like, interesting. I was real hurt by it at first. I'm like, what's the lesson here? Mm-hmm. And I started to ask around, what am I doing? And you're bombarding their feed.
Yeah.
They have no idea who the fuck you are.
Yeah.
They don't know to care about you. Mm-hmm. You might appreciate them as a friend, but they don't know who you are.
Right.
Don't treat them like a friend. It's a one-way street now.
Exactly.
Find your audience on your level. Stop trying to be here right now.
Right. Twitter's like the water cooler. Like if you've ever been to a job or like a corporate position where they have like the kitchen water cooler, that's what it is. You could be talking to the owner of the company or the guy whose first day it is, and they can have a conversation and they can be talking about whatever's going on at the time. Yeah. And that's kind of what it comes down to is like the owner of the company is not going to give that person that just started a raise just because they had a conversation.
No.
But they can have a conversation and they can learn from one another by being in that same space.
Absolutely. That person on day one, if they share an idea, maybe they've been thinking about these things just as long as the owner. Yeah. But when it comes down to it, it's like the owner has no reason to believe that they should believe that person.
Exactly.
You have to pay your dues, whatever that looks like in society. Mm-hmm. And I'm just grateful that, it's somebody that I understood enough to stop and say, okay, why would somebody that I admire go out of their way to notice me enough to block me?
Yeah.
How can I pivot personally on this? Mm-hmm. That's the whole point of my library of consciousness is how did I go from the person who would have been like, well, now I fucking hate Taleb. Like, I can't believe that I've been slighted by somebody who, up until that moment, never noticed me. Like, I could even look at that. I could either look at that as he noticed me and I can feel slighted, or he noticed me and what I'm doing isn't working.
Right.
I need to check myself. That's why I put together my library of consciousness. I don't believe that this could help anyone else. Mm-hmm. But if people can use this to be inspired as to how to help themselves, that's the whole point. I could see a future where everyone has their own library of consciousness, their collection, so that they can help understand themselves better, the ideas that they're working on, their own commentary, so that other people can look at that and see, this is how, Jace, it helps them understand me, not necessarily to understand themselves with that same data, but so that I can be understood.
It's just like a public Google Drive where you store all the stuff that you learn along the way.
It started that way where I had a Google Doc where it was all the audiobooks that I've gotten, because I got into, adult reading about 2.5 years ago. The last book I read before that was, I think, Harry Potter. Yeah, that was it, Harry Potter. And then I went like almost 10 years and started my first adult book was No More Mr. Nice Guy. And then it just, started into Robert Greene, Mark Manson, all of these things, and went from wanting it to work to it just working. And I'm like, oh, my wants and beliefs and feelings were getting in the way of this. I started externalizing all of those. I still experience feelings and beliefs, but for all intents and purposes, I don't really have feelings and beliefs. I have emotions that feelings used to distract me from. I still experience feelings, but I question those and my beliefs to find out what are useful. Well, they all become choices.
Exactly. See, it all comes back to like what I was saying, joyfulness and happiness.
Yes.
Like you can choose to be in a mental place, but you feel emotion based on the things that happen to you.
Yeah.
Like I think that's actually really prolific. I think that that's one of the biggest things that people forget to kind of resolve within themselves is that you can wake up and feel really shitty.
Yeah.
I do that a lot. Like, I wake up and I don't want to do anything. I wake up and I want to call out of work that day. I want to roll in bed and I want to feel sick. And my stomach, as I sit there and think about it, starts to feel sick.
Yeah.
And I could roll over and I can actually throw up and be sick all day long because I, at that moment, made the decision to grasp onto that.
Yeah.
Or I can roll over, stand up, look out of the window, take a breath, and immediately feel relief.
And it doesn't necessarily even mean that you aren't, from a purely scientific level, actually sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's just realizing that our choices can augment our situation either in the positive or the negative.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
There's I've had about 6 foot surgeries in my life over the past 15 years to correct collapsed arches. And I remember what helped me more than even the surgeries. My apologies if my surgeon is hearing this. It helped a lot, but the mental block that was helping me from even appreciating the work that had been done on my feet was during the recovery periods. I couldn't walk for 3 months. I was on a knee scooter for 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Between all my foot surgeries, I've been on a knee scooter without being able to walk for about a year over my entire life. Of months of just so I've learned to appreciate walking in a way that most people have to become paralyzed to appreciate it. And I got to the point where I would dread these surgeries for that limited mobility so much that I had a mental health practitioner that taught me something pretty controversial when it comes to mental health practice. But he wasn't wrong. It was, you can choose happiness in unhappy situations.
Exactly.
That is your choice. And I'm like, I don't believe that. Yeah. And it got to the point where I didn't know how to argue with him that I didn't believe it. I tried to practice it, but subconsciously I still didn't believe it enough for it to work.
Right.
Then it just started clicking. All of these things started falling into place, and I realized that not all of my beliefs were bad. I just didn't know how to tell the difference between beliefs that were leading me towards a positive goal and my self-limiting beliefs.
Right.
So me externalizing all of my beliefs, getting them out there where I'm like, I'm going to question them all, helped me get to the point where it didn't hurt if I challenged my beliefs.
Right. I think people get emotionally invested in the things that they were taught.
Yeah.
It's like you have to actually take into account how that information actually plays in the world, because there is a very, very fine line between the way you want the world to be and the way the world actually is. Yeah. And if you don't take advantage and grasp on to the way that the world actually is, that is where you end up in this barrage of negativity, and you can't escape that, because by definition that is insanity. Yeah. You're looking at the reality of the world and saying, no, I'm not gonna accept that. This is my reality. Yeah. And ultimately, you have to realize that there are positive and there are negative. Yeah. And that is life. Every single day there are going to be things that either make you feel better or make you feel worse. Yeah. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you can channel that into something that's going to help someone feel better, or you can channel that into something that's going to help someone feel worse. But whatever action that you do, because ultimately that's all we have control over. Yeah. You have your actions. You have the things that you actually do. And that's what other people see. I can say whatever I want. I can tell you any words that I want, have opinions, but if I wouldn't have reached out to you and I wouldn't have set this up, I wouldn't have a podcast. Yeah. I can want it and I can have all these opinions all day long, but if I don't take the action to do something, what does it matter? That's so true, because most of us live in this reality where we think there's one reality. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about is what my theory of relative reality, which is pretty much goes into explaining how I observe that all intelligent life, whether it be any type of individual creature that has any level of intelligence, but varying levels of understanding, whether that be an ant or a cow or a dog or a human or a child, like different levels of understanding separate the value of different types of intelligence
when it comes to understanding the reality that you exist in.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, there's like right here, we have, I observe 3 different realities.
Mm-hmm.
My reality,
Mm-hmm.
your reality,
Yeah.
and the reality that we're sharing.
Yeah.
And that comes from a compassion to understand
Mm-hmm.
that is sometimes harder. If our realities are more clashing,
Mm-hmm.
it's still possible to get to a positive mutual reality.
Exactly.
It's like that saying agree to disagree, which has kind of been lost.
Mm-hmm.
It's either agree or disagree.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that kind of comes down to people. They focus more on how to get somewhere as opposed to the location that you're trying to end up at.
Yeah.
Because the way that you do things, the method behind it, the values that you have, the reasons you wake up and do it every day can be 100% different than mine.
Yeah.
And that can create conflict. That can create arguments and disagreements.
Yeah.
And you can't see past the process to realize that we're all heading in the same direction. We all want the same thing.
Yeah.
We want to be peaceful. We want information to be out there.
Yeah.
And we want people to be able to progress themselves forward.
And this is honestly one of the things I've observed with the clash between what I call the engineers and the visionaries.
Mm-hmm.
The visionaries are almost always the minority in societies. And time is determining whether or not they're relevant.
Right.
So it's why we're all in the same place at different times. I've seen many engineers that eventually become, the visionaries, and many visionaries that go back to being engineers.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to, do you see solutions that can be built towards,
mm-hmm.
or do you see the solutions for a vision that the pieces need to be assembled now?
I think that's something that I'd love to hear you touch more on, is finding solutions as opposed to just coming up with ideas. So I think that's definitely a big thing that makes it different as well, is when you're putting things out there that are just random ideas but don't actually offer a solution, don't actually do anything or provide value or fix anything.
Yeah.
It just flops, because what is the point? Why would I adapt something new into my mentality and into my life if I'm happy with where I'm at and I have no idea what you're telling me?
Yeah, this is something that when it comes to studying philosophy, you see this a lot back in Rome and Greece and stuff, where the arguments between different types of schools of thought, whether they were Marcus Aurelius or Socrates, and it really comes down to, Socrates kind of led the way of a lot of thought, but the way he thought earlier in life was much different than the way he thought after.
Exactly. Yeah.
So even some of his pupils that carried on his earlier works tried to prove that his later works were, false, because they were more existential. Mm-hmm. And, Socrates' ideas of school and education were completely different to him later, where I know nothing.
Yeah. And
it's just interesting how this guy, you have people that are changing all the time. Mm-hmm. And if they're held to a past, if the people are looked as a human that needs to be static their whole life, this is kind of what's happening. I don't know if you saw what happened with Kanye on Kimmel.
Yeah.
It's like he's being held to the standards
that he has to be this gangster, that kind of a person. It's like, why? He decided to be different.
Yeah, exactly. He's constantly changing. He's a human that, just because he was anti-Bush at one point doesn't mean he can't be pro-Trump. It doesn't even matter. That's not the point.
He could have been anti-Trump at one point and be pro-Trump now.
It's exploring and challenging your beliefs.
Exactly.
If you don't, when you're challenging your beliefs, if you can't actually go into the frame of mind where, if you want to challenge why am I anti-Trump, and you can't go into how could I be pro-Trump, mm-hmm. then you're not truly challenging your beliefs. Sure. It doesn't matter if you switch from anti or pro. I kind of went pro-government to anti-government to find a positive middle ground mm-hmm. that's more neutral than anything. I'm not looking to take down. I'm looking to improve by giving an alternate solution that can work side by side with any form of government whether it's government as we know it, form of governances like, huge companies, even small companies, like the problems with government as we know it and something like Walmart is the way they enforce control.
Right.
That's a form of breakdown in governance, whether it's in the private sector or public sector. That's the whole cronyism problem, where it's apparent in the public sector or private sector. It's growing like a cancer, smothering free markets and, all sorts of economic systems. It's the same cancer that kills the ideals of socialism, the ideals of, a republic that gets too much on the democracy side. I'm not pro-socialism. I'm not pro-republic or democracy or any of these things, but I'm also not anti any of them. And that led me to this whole decentralized philosophy, which I realize a lot of people practice, but very few people, even in the crypto communities, understand the decentralized philosophy.
Or they do it, they don't realize that that's what they're doing. Kind of.
Like Gary Vee, he talks about the sharing economy, which is literally economics on the decentralized philosophy. Like Jeremy Rifkin, he talks about the third industrial revolution, which is a decentralized, distributed sort of network. It's like in the existing infrastructure, just like crypto is. And I'm like, this is all decentralized philosophy, something that hundreds of years ago was an ideal that the founding fathers, Ben Franklin, who understood the power of a republic. But how do you get everyone represented? He's like, let's have it more distributed than even Rome was, because people are like, you got to be stupid if you want to bring back the same form of government, the republic, that was such a horrible, epic failure that we went back to monarchies.
Well, ultimately, too, I mean, the fall of Rome really came when Julius Caesar decided to turn it back into a dictation.
He got control over the democracy, which was distributed amongst the republic. And there's a really good video in my library of consciousness that transitions from that shows the transition between different types of power structures, republics, oligarchies, dictatorships, social, and all of them are broken by democracy in some way. And a republic gets to a point where if the democracy has more power that can be centralized by a Caesar or a president, the republic side, the representatives, become powerless. Even the Constitution of Rome became powerless when the democracy was offset to be influenced directly by the Caesar. And then you had the reign of the Caesars, more centralization of power. You had Constantine, who centralized the anarchists, called the Christians at the time. You have all of these things were centralizing power. And you have this epic story throughout all of history as we know it, which some people think it's families versus these families, ideals versus or religious beliefs versus this religion. It's really just control versus, letting people be, trust and honesty in its utmost form. And sometimes structures of control get more advanced and more control than ever before. And then they collapse. And these existing societies of almost anarchy underneath survive. And
honestly, I think control is probably one of the leading factors toward, like you referred to it as a disease or a sickness. I think that control is really step one. That's if you're trying to control your situation, then you'll find that you get depressed because you can't control the world. You can't control the people that are out there. Ultimately, there will always be someone that is as free thinking as you are.
Oh, absolutely. And what it comes down to is what I've identified for myself personally is the difference between self-control and self-mastery, which is self-control, as I've been taught to understand it, is, you don't let yourself do certain things. You might get to a point of awareness where you're like, I was keeping myself in a cage and I had a jailer, and now I need to put that jailer in the cage and be afraid that it'll get out.
Exactly. And then you're constantly taking a part of who you are and a part of what makes you you, and you're pushing that down, and now you're not authentically yourself, and eventually that will get out. Let's just put that on the record and make that really clear. It will eventually get out.
And you live in so much fear of that happening, you try and deny that inevitable future, that when it does get out, you're wholly unprepared. Mm-hmm. This is something that I talk about Taleb a lot. His works have obviously influenced me a lot. If you haven't read his books, read them now. But he talks about, these principles that are apparent, especially with, when it comes to the subject of nuclear research. You have what happened with Fukushima, and, up until that time, we had never had a level 7 meltdown. We realized that nuclear reactors were made to contain and cool level 5 meltdowns, because I think that's what happened in Chernobyl. Mm-hmm. And that just became the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Nobody expected anything worse than the worst of the worst.
Right.
Until it came, and we realized, we contained a level 7 meltdown, but we can't cool it because everything is broken because we're containing a level 7 meltdown. Yeah. We didn't make the cooling stuff to survive a level 7 meltdown. And you realize, if we can poorly prepare and plan for a situation like that by not expecting anything worse than the worst of the worst, what if that happens on the other side? If we can't believe in anything other than the best of the best, how could we ever imagine an improvement on the American system of government if it's already the best of the best? I'm like, I'm not saying that the founding fathers were wrong. I'm just saying that they didn't plan for industrial revolutions.
Exactly.
How do we separate government from economies that the Industrial Revolution works?
Yeah.
And it's advancing at rates that governments can't handle. How do we create almost a constitution for economics, an economic constitution that updates faster than our Constitution was made to?
Right.
When we think about decentralized, especially in the decentralized philosophy, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, we're saying that everyone who wants to be in America understands that these are unalienable human rights.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that if the founding fathers had the technology, that they wouldn't have said, why doesn't everyone have their own Bill of Rights?
Right.
Why doesn't everyone have their own Constitution? Right now, we call that, for a company, a terms of service.
Exactly.
Your user agreement with Google or Facebook, when you use that login anywhere on the internet.
And you're restricted. You have things that you can and cannot do, just like our Constitution, where you have laws and you have restrictions and you have things that are given to you as well as things that are kept away from you. That's how social media works.
Oh, absolutely.
That is already the infrastructure. Literally, we have a Constitution where in our day-to-day we have ultimate freedom, more or less. But on social media, we're wearing shackles because we have to do exactly what they want us to do, or tough, you're gone.
Yeah. Everything's tied into, in these forms of governments, it's like they have to know who you are.
Yeah.
Regardless if you know who you are on a philosophical level, it's you identify as this person legally. You start to realize that all of these things have become almost a new form of currency. And your identity is a form of currency. And I started to realize, you can have a decentralized economy with any sort of exchange of value, economy as we think it, or economy being companies or, universities, or all of these things are little economies that have different types of exchanges of value.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to that point, you start to realize, how do we protect the individual in a global economy that's trying to figure out how do we balance all this? We got to individualize it. That means that people could play in the American economy or the German economy or the Chinese economy, but also have, a decentralized economy ID card that works in digital space.
Right.
That's somewhere between, the dark web and the light web, where it's decentralized space, where, you have an access card, you are whoever you want to be.
Right.
It's as anonymous or as public as you want it to be. Not unlike Malmi's, identify original concept before it became a cryptocurrency.
Right.
You could use that to play in, a decentralized economy while you're still living, paying taxes, trying the American experiment, but try this new experiment side by side.
Yeah.
See if this business idea you have takes off more in decentralized space or in America. It doesn't matter. You could do both simultaneously in an interconnected internet of economics.
Yeah. That's the beauty of the internet, is that everything is connected.
Yeah.
I like to think of it, I call it the bell curve of posting. Yeah. So essentially, every single piece of content that you go out is potentially your next viral piece of content. And people don't realize that literally every single post can grow and become that viral content. It doesn't have to happen when you hit upload.
Yeah, time is the only variable.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, let's say you upload or share one of your posts to the Library of Consciousness page today, right? And you put something out there, and it gets, just your average, basic, nothing fancy, right? And then tomorrow, or the next time that you post something else, and it goes viral. Yeah. And it explodes and gets all of this engagement. All of the posts that are surrounding it, when this post goes viral, you can imagine it's like a stick with a tent. Yeah. And so it kind of raises everything that's around it. It's like you're pitching that tent, and all the posts that are around that viral content also get risen up. Yeah. And as it rises, it has more of a potential to get that engagement that it needs to become viral. Yeah. So one viral content can push all the other content up, and then this one gets viral and it pushes all of it up.
It's what happened with Jordan B. Peterson. Exactly. He had been creating content for years, and that one interview made all of his other content visible. Right now it's mostly his books. But it's like I've been experiencing his lessons for years with the videos on Facebook that I'm a part of a book club for, the 12 Rules of Life. But I realized, reading the first few chapters of the 12 Rules of Life, I'm like, I got all this from watching his videos over years. Exactly. Most of these people reading the book haven't gotten, but I'm like, that's not bad. He found a way to condense it and make it more accessible. More power to him.
Exactly. I have a similar experience with Gary Vaynerchuk, because I recently found his content this year, which is really weird, because he's been putting out, considering what I do specifically in social media, optimizing Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and all of those platforms that I work with. It's really surprising that I didn't know who Gary Vaynerchuk was. But when I found him earlier this year, in probably January, February, something like that, I was really happy, because I was able to see all of this validation for the same thoughts and same mentality that I had, and able to see the success that he was able to get with that same thought process. And it's very nice to have the validation what you're doing is going to lead to some sort of success,
Yeah, because the biggest con we've ever been told in life in our generation, and every generation that I found that's still alive, is that failure needs to feel like failure, the way we've been trained for failure to feel. Right. That sounds like a poem, but if you pick that apart, it's really like, if you fail a test, you feel bad. So failure has become a way to feel bad. Right. But failure is one of the best teachers ever. Exactly. So I'm like, at a certain point, you can even fail up. I use this parable where it's, imagine people sitting at these slot machines, and these are not a form of gambling. This is the way that people go to work. They sit at the slot machine, they pull a little lever, and they get a number that's spit out. The whole goal is to, get as many fives. That's, how you're producing. Yeah. But if you get a 10, you've made it. You're done. You can retire. Gotcha. So you're polling. You get a few fives a day, but you're just wishing for that 10. And somebody else starts, and they're there for a week. They're not really making friends. Yeah. Nobody really knows much about them. And one day they pull it, and they get they're like, I got a 10. And everybody looks over, crowds around them, and they're like, no, you didn't get a 10. You got a 3 and a 4 and another 3. Yeah. Sorry, I did that math wrong. Did I? Wait,
3, 4, and 3. Yeah, that would be
yeah. So it's like, you got 2 4s and a 2.
Right.
It's like you didn't get 10, you got 2 4s and a 2. Math does not come easy for me.
Oh yeah, no worries. But I understand the analogy.
Yeah, so you got 2 4s and a 2. You didn't even get a 5, let alone a 10.
Yeah.
And then one of the bosses comes over and they say, "Yep, you're done." And everyone's like, "What?" No, and it's like that's not right. And then you start talking amongst yourselves, and it's like, we see this happen. He didn't get a 10. There's something wrong here. He did something wrong because we were told we need to get a 10, and that was 2 4s and a 2. That's that's 3 set. And then you say, but that adds up to 10. Yeah. And I'm like, if that was a way we could do it, we would know.
Well, have you tried?
And it's like that's what it comes down to. It's like we fit in this certain norm of where failure needs to feel like failure, when somebody is just like, what if I stop looking at these numbers as a failure anymore?
Yeah.
These add up to 10.
Well, there's also
what
fear
if this
of
works?
failure.
Yeah.
Because none of those people, in the example that you just gave, none of those original people tried that method.
Yeah.
That's why you didn't know if it worked or not, because you didn't try it.
Yep. And then we'll sit around and try and talk each other out of trying it. When I'm like, just try it. It doesn't matter if it feels wrong. Does it give you the results? Because like you said, it's you talked earlier about kind of the analogy of do the means justify the ends? And I'm like, we've gotten to the point where we try and justify the means so much, we forget, does this even get us to the ends that we want anymore?
You gotta love that process, because ultimately you can't. That's the one thing that you can't escape. If you want a goal, whatever that success is for you, that can be financial success and you're making millions. That can be you just don't wake up with anxiety every day. That can be you're able to support your family and not have to stress out about it. Like there's varying like it doesn't have to be financially based for it to be success. But once you figure out what you want, what that success is that you're striving for, there is a path and a process to get there. And I think that people fear the process. They fear the path to get to the point that they want. It's not that they're scared of the outcome. They want the outcome. They're looking forward to the outcome, but they're scared of how to get there because
they don't know how to verify.
Exactly.
Tying back into pretty much how we started this, it's trust but verify is something that people have heard of. They don't know how to do for themselves in all information.
Right.
It helped me learning decentralized philosophy to learn how to apply the trust but verify that I knew worked with education into my own mental health. Some people need this in different areas of their life.
Right.
And I'm like, what it comes down to is people might say that they trust themselves, but if the way you trust yourself isn't providing you consistent positive results, then maybe it's broken. Maybe it needs to be improved on. It doesn't need to be wrong.
Yeah.
But don't look at it as wrong to experiment with new ways to do it. It's like, that's why I realized we have a society where our language, we have wrong, right, and then not right, which also feels like wrong. And then you have not wrong, which isn't used. That's kind of the hashtag for this movement that I'm using, and that's connecting all of these nonprofits together with decentralized branding, taking in what I know about, marketing and all of that stuff to this decentralized infrastructure of exchanges.
Right.
Not wrong is something we don't utilize in society, but when you have an imbalance of one way to feel wrong and then one way to feel right and 2 ways to feel wrong, you have an imbalance. If you have not wrong, which is, it doesn't need to be the same as right. I'm like, we have this inch game that we play with who's more right and who's more wrong. I'm like, let's take a minute, look at what's not wrong that we haven't tried yet.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, these things are wrong. These are not wrong. I don't know how they're right. So by natural instinct, I would be inclined to think that they're wrong if I don't have a way to neutralize it.
Yeah. And you can always become wrong too.
Yeah.
And I think that people hold on to the fact that they won that argument.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that things change. At one period of time, the majority of the planet won the argument that the world was flat.
Yeah.
And then guess what?
Things
Someone
changed.
started sailing, and slowly but surely it became flip-flopped, and now the major opinion is that the earth is a ball.
Yep.
It's like,
and now the debate has started. You realize that these things, it doesn't matter what's been proven. It matters what people want to believe.
exactly.
So it doesn't even matter what is proof unless it matters to you.
Exactly. And those people that said that it was flat were not intrinsically wrong because they didn't have that information at that time.
Yeah.
When they learned, they adapted. Some people would point to those, ancient philosophers and say, "Oh, well, you changed your opinion.
Yeah.
You changed your thoughts. You changed. This isn't what you said 5 years ago. So this isn't what you wrote down in the papyrus. So how do I know that this is actually what you believe?"
People change all the time. Like when it comes down to it, it's
you learn new information.
Absolutely. And being wrong is a great way to learn what does and doesn't work for yourself, not what does and doesn't work for all of society.
Exactly.
When it comes down to it, like I've gone from bleeding heart liberal before socialism was widely understood enough for it to be popular in the 90s, bleeding heart liberal to, staunch Republican conservative to realizing that there needed to be a better way. I was already wrong once in my beliefs, and then I moved on to Tea Party. That fell off the boat, and became pretty extreme. And then I found libertarianism, and that's become idealistic. And I kept shifting, realizing all of these are showing me things that I know about myself.
Right.
But I don't match with I feel like I'm trying to pretend to be somebody else if I believe in all of the ideology.
It's like a dice trying to pretend they're a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or 5
we have
or 6.
multi-sides.
Yeah, it's like you're not either of those numbers. You're a dice.
Yeah.
You have all of those opinions, all of those feelings, all of that information inside of you. And that creates
Absolutely
the ultimate piece that people can then look at.
Yep. And I got to the point where I was really confused, where I was like, I love the idea of the Constitution, what it stands for, especially at that time in context. I'm like, am I a constitutionalist? And then somebody was like, oh, you're an anarchist. And I looked it up. I realized everything I knew about anarchy was wrong.
Oh, yeah. I recently had this self-discovery as well. A couple months ago, I don't remember who it was, but someone was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and they were talking about anarchy. I did some research, and I was like, holy crap, I thought anarchy was like people shooting each other and lawlessness.
That's chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Anarchy is having the strength to be empowered through chaos. And I'm like, anarchy made a lot of sense, and then I discovered anarcho-capitalism, which I aligned with pretty well. And then I, realized that I was coming more in alignment with things that my creative side, my imagination. I stopped lucid dreaming, which I had done for about 15 years. Lucid dreaming stopped as I started working on my nonprofit work. I don't even dream anymore. Like
really,
during the day, I'm working on things which I'm building towards a vision where it almost feels like time travel sometimes. We're all daydreaming.
Yeah, and then it's like,
imagine this, come back here and be like, okay, I'm back in this reality.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that can't be any less real.
Right.
These are things that I had been trained to think that these are delusions. You need to be afraid of these. And being able to quantify the difference between positive, neutral, and negative has helped me balance the difference between delusions, which I realize you don't have to be mentally ill to be delusional anymore.
Right.
That's the phenomenon that we're calling mental unhealth, which is something that got real popular in the age of anxiety in the 1800s that Nellie Bly addressed by going into the mental asylums. But this was on the streets. It was just worse in the mental asylums, where somebody who was mentally ill or not mentally ill alike could go into a mental asylum and come out crazy on the other side.
Exactly.
That was the mental unhealth movement. And I'm realizing, throwing back to what I started with, were the laws of thrust, where you have, you're going towards mental health at the cost of the mentally ill. We've seen this before in history.
Yeah.
The last advocate we've had for mental health was Nellie Bly, who stumbled into it as a journalist. It's not like, it's not like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, who were just, the positive message and the negative message, but at the time were both seen as negative. Like, that's something time has turned, Martin Luther King Jr. into the positive and Malcolm X into the negative.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is,
It's flipped.
Martin Luther King Jr. was more brilliant at positive framing, which has really good long-term effects.
Exactly.
It's not to say that Malcolm X wasn't saying the exact same data, pointing out the exact same things, have the same intentions.
Right. Same thing as Gandhi. That stuff, those beliefs, that philosophy was there for years and years and years and years. Like, where do you think he learned it from? Where do you think that he was surrounding himself with, and the people that were around him when he developed those? And obviously,
he's a great example.
You look at history, like Gandhi did a lot of things that we would think are probably not the best today. And they're starting to come more and more to light. But ultimately, as time goes on, you learn the different details. You learn the other numbers.
How to frame things positive, negative, the value of reviews, that it works in not just your life, but other people's lives. These are very important. This is the major difference between Marcus Aurelius, who 900 years before Jesus Christ was like talking about the same things. It's just his message had one missing piece. Yeah. How to find hope in this message of don't fear death. He's like, give up on the fear of death. Jesus Christ was like, give up on the fear of death with hope of eternal life. It's like Jesus Christ growth hacked Marcus Aurelius' message by giving hope to humans, which are creatures of hope. Right. In a way that, is framing it positive. He used Yelp's business model 2,000 years before Yelp came around with having people review, like not even saying this works. It's like having other people review him. Yeah. Marcus Aurelius didn't have that. Jesus Christ framed it positively. That's one of the things when you go from, studying Christianity to studying, something like Islam, it looks inherently negative because of the way it's framed. The same way Malcolm X looks inherently negative compared to Martin Luther King Jr. Well, they're saying the same things.
Look at Judaism and Christianity. It's literally the same book. It's just one of them has an extra New Testament added onto it. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously differences, but
absolutely,
more or less, the Old Testament is the Jewish Bible.
Absolutely.
And these different perspectives in the same story,
They're all writing about how to be interconnected with, whether or not you call it God, a collective conscious, the universe, or positivity or positive vibes. We're all connected in a way that some people have found a way to connect these things through time, whether it's Marcus Aurelius, Jesus Christ, and whether it's Buddha. But all of these things are, you have Jesus Christ who's take action, Buddha who's passive. There's a harmony, a balance between both.
I love that word, harmony. Yeah. A lot of people, they look for the balance, or they look for how you can have one has so much influence, one has so much influence. How do we find the balance? I don't think that balance is the right word. I don't think that balance is the right focus or mentality that we should be putting into it. We should be thinking of it as harmony, like a music ensemble. When you go to an ensemble, every single one of those instruments is playing a different song. And if you had every single one of those people, I used to play saxophone in a band, and I know what I would be playing is different than what the guy on the clarinet next to me is playing. And individually they sound like different songs, but when we play them together, it's in harmony, and it creates a melody that is ultimately the message that you're trying to put out there.
Yeah. And otherwise, if you have one that is more apparent than the other and it's out of balance, it's a solo.
Exactly.
And you got to realize that, you either believe that, by saying that there's only one right way, that you're also saying, in essence, that everything else is wrong.
Right.
And if you believe in something like, let's say, that everyone has an equal chance of being right. But if you believe that, you're realizing that, whoever your God is, he's a respecter of persons.
Right.
Either people have an equal chance of being right or wrong, or by you saying that you're even more right than everyone else, you're saying that everyone else is wrong.
Yeah.
And that it comes to a point where that's a superiority complex where you need to be honest that if you're saying we're more right, that you are also saying we also believe that everyone else is wrong.
Exactly.
And if you have beliefs that you are more correct than everyone else, but you also believe that like maybe your God is no respecter of persons, how could your God of maybe a God of truth and knowledge not be a respecter of persons if you believe that you are so right that by logical effect and reason that everyone else is more wrong than you.
Right.
It's like you're saying, oh, apparently he is a respecter of persons. So that's
look
one
at
of
Christianity itself.
Oh, yeah.
Like we're sitting here comparing it to other religions. Look at the actual just religion of Christianity. How many sects of Christianity are there? There's Baptists and Pentecostals and First-day Adventists and whatever. Like, I don't even know what there are. Like, I grew up in Georgia where I, like, driving down the street, you see, like, 7 different types of churches and denominations of the same faith. But they all think the other one's wrong.
Absolutely.
It's like you believe the same thing. You follow the same God. What does it matter what you do and what steps you take to get there? At the end of the day, you're going to the same place. You believe in the same thing. So it's like, why is there that conflict, you know?
And it gets to a certain point where you look at it and it's like if really what they're disagreeing on is semantics, it's keeping them divided.
Yeah.
In a way that, you know, even Jesus Christ didn't teach.
Right.
And I'm like,
focusing on the process and not the outcome, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And that gets to a point where it's like, you know, if people are saying, I believe in the universe, or I believe in positive vibes, or I believe in Buddha or Allah or Jesus Christ or whatever, how, at a certain point, even if, you know, the ideologies are worded differently, it's like, is the underlying core message the same? And is it relevant whether or not you call your God Allah or Jesus Christ? Is that become to a point where is it relevant as somebody who doesn't speak Spanish and somebody who's trying to learn English saying, I believe in Jesus Cristo? It's like, and they like, no, Jesus Christ is God. It's like,
well, it kind of goes back to
it's the same thing. It's just one person speaks and they're speaking a different language. I'm like, this is a different philosophical language. And I'm like, we either look how we're alike and connect with love and understanding, which is a disparity we're at now. We're more interconnected than ever. People desperately want to be understood. And that either makes them angry because they don't know how or aren't willing to put in the time.
Well, let's go back to your Twitter
to understand.
With what you were saying, you know, it's like you reach out to someone on these platforms, and ultimately you have to think about it like whatever you look at as God or the energy or whatever, you know, wherever mindset you're at with that, wherever you're at listening to this, you have to remember that it's kind of the same thing as what we were talking about earlier as far as having a message and putting it across different distribution platforms. Yeah. When you reach out on Twitter, even though you're the same person, you come across very different than when you reach out on Facebook. The guy you're talking about, when you go and you read his books, you feel like you're his best friend. But when you reach out on Twitter, you get blocked because you're a random person.
Yeah. There's a disparity in that relationship for
sure. He's not a different person, though. Yeah. He is still the same person. He's the same guy that wrote that book that did that on Twitter. Like, but
no doubt.
But we look at it as that's kind of an analogy. Obviously, it's like when we look at God or energy or faith or whatever. That's the way it kind of goes to that guy. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to look at you on this platform and what you said here, and that's going to be all I take. Yeah. That's all I'm receiving.
And you're not wrong. It really comes down to this disparity of information, which we can use to either let us believe that we understand someone or set our beliefs aside, understand someone separate from our beliefs, and connect on a level that can improve our ideas, that even improve our beliefs.
Yeah, and what we were saying about being right and wrong, you know, it's like you never actually know if you're right because you may, and society may validate that you're right for your entire life. And then 3 generations later, you find out that everything you stood for is not actually true. Like they could find out tomorrow, they could find a black hole, and it could literally rewrite all of physics. Yeah. And we literally know all of the things that we think we know This whole conversation, being the Earth being round, us being in the planetary system the way we are, the way the universe works, why we are alive, why we have emotional intelligence as opposed to the animals that we share this planet with. All of these things are just sitting there and waiting. Like tomorrow, we could find an answer to any one of those questions, and everything that we just talked about is immediately irrelevant and immediately "quote unquote" wrong.
And I absolutely agree with that to an extent where I found an answer for myself, which provides a solution, which kind of life hacks the negative side of that, because it's very painful to get to the point where, you know, how do you go from what you understand to being prepared to understand anything without going through something like nihilism?
Right.
I mean, Jim Carrey went through that. Nihilism is almost always inevitable, but staying in nihilism is not. It's not inevitable that once you become nihilist that you stay there. You can make positive choices to get out of that. And one of the things that I realized is I had part of me that was like understanding that. I'm like, yeah, I could get an answer tomorrow and realize, what if everything I believe, you know, an alien spaceship comes down and I realize that, you know, what I had, my genetic fallacy took me to a point where I'm like, what if I realized that Jesus Christ was a little green alien?
And we won't know unless something comes down from the sky and tells us and proves it and even then we don't know. We weren't alive 2,000 years ago. So even then we're trusting the word of that alien to tell us the truth.
And that even comes down to are we led by our beliefs to the point where we need something to believe to find our own meaning? Or does it come down to, you know, if you can't process that, like if I wasn't able to process that, I would have to go into a point of nihilism. It's like if I can believe in that and this, it's like I would rather not believe in anything. And I'm like, no, my beliefs are a choice.
Yeah.
Even when I, you know, was practicing the day-to-day, you know, theology of religion, I realized all of it was a choice. So even if I don't practice the church side of religion, I realize all of that makes up who I am.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether or not it's right or wrong. It's how do I improve my own life beyond it, where I don't necessarily care if things happen the way I've wanted to believe that they will happen, or a way that I don't really care and it gets to the point where it's almost, for me, it's almost like a split second of nihilism. And then I accept, like, how does it affect me in the now? It doesn't? Okay, then I move on to the point where I'm like, it comes to a point where I'm like, I don't care what is absolutely right. I realize that you can have conflicting realities that work in harmony and even enhance our understanding of one reality to another, knowing that, you know, one belief is completely false in another reality.
Right.
Usually a reality that's in the future of what we expect, our expectations.
Expectations are the biggest thing that will bring you downfall. Absolutely. Like
they're the biggest root of self-limiting beliefs.
If you're looking for a way to be depressed and you're looking for a way to develop anxiety in your life, start setting expectations today on every single thing in your life. And then you'll see that as the world works the way the world works, you will be disappointed over and over again.
And nothing leads people to be more dishonest than having expectations, I've found.
Yeah, because you're trying to get your goal at all costs. It's not the authenticity or the truth or the passion behind it anymore. It's the goal, the outcome. That becomes the sole focus.
You realize you get trained to lie for the greater good. Whoever decides that greater good, you know, hopefully it's you, but if it's not, then, you know, you're lying for someone else and you might not even need to know that you're lying.
I can't stand that. One of the things with my company that I work for is at one point, because we're mobile, obviously we do agency-based work, so it's like all out there, would be that as we transitioned our business model, when we were talking to people on the phones, they wanted us to say we were in Las Vegas to give like a perspective, you know, where we were at. I never did. And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why I've always had positive interactions with people, because from the get-go, I'm being 100% honest with you on everything that comes out of my mouth. And I'm automatically assuming, even though this may not be the truth, because we'll obviously fact check on whenever it's things that influence my opinion and my personality, but I assume that everyone's being the same way that I am. Yeah. That everyone is going forward with the same authenticity and waking up every single day and realizing that all you have control over is your actions and them choosing to do an action that's going to give them a positive result. I just go through and I just assume that that's the case until someone proves to me that they care more about an outcome than they do about what's being said on a daily basis. Because ultimately, I don't even know if I'm going to be alive to see the outcome.
Yeah.
I could record.
It doesn't even matter at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I could record all of this. I could do all of this, finish it, and have all of it scheduled, upload it, ready to go. Something could happen to me. Those episodes could still get out there, and I'm not even there.
Yeah.
Like, the point is you may not see the success point. When you're Martin Luther King Jr., you may not see civil rights in life. You may not see your dream come to reality.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't wake up and do everything you can to make it happen that day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And we've gone through all these cycles of fighting for control, fighting for human rights, and you realize that, America had a switch at about 1861, where America was able to define rights for the first time ever in American history. Human rights, the difference between right and wrong, what qualified as a human, what qualified, as all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize it's like, if that switch hadn't happened in 1861, for really great intents and purposes, like they were fighting, for the means, but lost sight of the ends. And at the end of the day, you ended up having to fight for control for things like women's rights, minority
that's
rights.
Convoluted. Yeah. Because if you actually go back and you look at European history, slavery was not based on race.
No, that was an American thing. You realize that conflicts with, the difference between controlling and live and let live. Mm-hmm. So they have to justify that with their emotional intelligence side. Exactly. So they invent racism to help people cope and accept it in society, so there's not uprising from people outside of the slavers. It's
exactly. Because otherwise you think about life and you think, oh, wow. I mean, well, look at where we're at today. The reason why people are social justice warriors is because they can be. Yeah. When you don't have to, when your focus is and your reality is not that people are out there getting beaten and enslaved to get you to work, and now we're all in the same equal playing field, there's different things that you have to point out. There's different things that you have to look at and say, well, this is now the wrong thing. Well, this is now the wrong thing.
Yeah. And what's interesting is something can be 100% wrong, but also have a place where it needs to exist and it's right. That's what's difficult, because you can even discover a new way to, have reality where it's completely contradictory, to the point where, let's look at particle physics for a second. Mm-hmm. This is something I obviously was very interested in from an early age. Like I talked about, Stephen Hawking's works, Einstein, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Now it's like all of these people talk about these particle physics in a way where the more we understand the quantum realm, like quantum mechanics, quantum theory as a whole, completely contradicts a lot of what we understand as laws of physics. Like, you can't be in two places at once.
Now we know you can.
In the quantum realm, you can. What's interesting is
be in two places at once and be entangled with one another. You do one thing to one electron, and it immediately is the same thing's happening to the other.
Yeah, and you start to realize that the quantum realm doesn't contradict our reality of physics, where one thing can't be in two places at the same time, but in the quantum realm they can. Yeah. If we could figure out how to travel matter between the two, that could revolutionize the way we understand the laws of physics, where we have the laws of physics in our reality and quantum laws of physics, which they're already inventing, and you start to realize that quantum laws of physics exist there, but not here. That doesn't mean that our laws of physics are wrong. It means that they're wrong there. That doesn't mean that these laws of physics are are wrong because they don't exist here. It's you can have coexisting realities.
Right.
The same way I'm like, we don't have to stop any economic theories to have, a new means of exchange.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like,
it's like the car thing, what we were talking about with Elon Musk and how he's slowly putting Teslas into the market. It's very similar with ideas.
Yeah.
It takes time for you to have Tesla be a brand new product. And then 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, you look around and Tesla's the new Nissan and everyone is driving it. And now you're thinking, oh, what is this car that everyone has around me?
Yeah. And it comes down to a point where it's like, if he has a big idea that people can't believe in, they think is impossible, he's either got to figure out a way to transition people to that or to create an alternate reality side by side with our reality so people can make a choice, because if they think all that can exist is what does exist and they don't have a positive choice to make, they're never going to do the hard work to get to that positive choice.
Yeah.
You see Elon Musk, who, got to start with PayPal, finance.
Right.
If I was in his position, one of the things I would have noticed is the same thing that I noticed from my business side, marketing, the distribution of information through marketing, from, news, entertainment, to all sorts of media. Is, debt in the marketing economy is guilt.
Right.
So guilt and obligation, social contracts. But in finance, what Elon Musk had a history in, it's literally the debt economics-based system.
Right.
It's not indentured servitude if you sign on for a contract for 30 years to, have a mortgage where you promise to work for 30 years for a house you can't afford right now. Yes, actually, that is indentured servitude. That's
the definition.
Yeah, that's the definition of indentured servitude. It's like you don't have the money to pay for it now. It's a debt. And we have these debt obligations, whether they're monthly payments where we can't survive without keeping that monthly payment up, so zero no longer starts at zero in our bank accounts.
Right.
That's something Elon Musk would have had a front row seat. And you start to realize the biggest perpetuator of the debt economy is the fossil fuel industry.
Right.
The way he's going about things, if I were him, what I would be doing for the next 10 years is getting, Tesla to the point where it's a brand name that everyone wants a Tesla, and you could offer, Tesla batteries, the self-driving car system, which within a few more iterations will become as good as any human driver, and then exponentially better.
Absolutely.
Insurance companies will stop wanting to insure people to drive their own cars.
Right.
You have a complete paradigm shift.
Exactly.
And then you realize, if I was Elon Musk at that point, what I would do, this is one of those things where right now, it could either be fantasy, delusion, or vision. Time will tell.
Right.
So I'm going to make a prediction that maybe years from now could point back to me and be like, I was predicting the future, or I was delusional.
Exactly.
Time will tell.
Who knows?
But if I was Elon Musk, what I would do is I'd keep on this path of making everyone want a Tesla, having them fund it with their wants by pre-sales, which is crowdfunding, the complete opposite of the top-down investment model, producers, Wall Street, record labels, all those top-down investment models that is in the car industry, usually top-down, majorly fueled by the oil industry. Right. And you realize they own a lot of these debt companies that create the loans for these cars, and that also fuels the innovations of the cars. So it's a win-lose scenario.
Yep.
And Elon Musk coming in here, it's like if everybody wants a self-driving car, everyone wants an electric car. Let's say, years from now he comes in, everyone wants those things, the Giga plant is up and running, he can mass produce them for homes and other vehicles. What if he says, look, if you let me put, a Tesla battery in your car and also put this self-driving tech in there, it reduces your insurance. Yeah. And in exchange, you let me take the engine in your car, which is the most valuable part of material for the car. You give me the engine and you give me your loan. Yeah. You sign that over to me. That's a no-brainer. Right. Everyone with a car would be like, hell yeah, I don't have to pay for gas anymore. My insurance goes down and I own my car outright. Like, you're not going to, no, you own it completely. I let you keep it. I just own your debt.
Yeah.
Then you start to realize something that, as a capitalist, I never agreed with unions and how it conflicts with government, but collective bargaining is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And I've changed my paradigm on a lot of those sort of things. And this, decentralized economy where if I were Elon Musk, I'd get to the point where I did that enough where I realized if I have even 50% of all the car loans of all the different debt companies that hold these loans, he holds a power that's never been held in America, where he could say to these debt companies, look, the old way of doing economics with a debt-based economy is over. You can either, call these loans settled and I'll give you $1 for each one, or I can default on them for 6 months and you can watch your stock prices plummet and take what's left at that point.
I didn't even think of that. That's
that's a 5-10 year plan. Like, hopefully I'm not spoiling Elon Musk's plans by getting that out there, but I'm like, at that point, it's really cool, he said so many things in the past that if people paid attention to the vision when they thought it was delusion, they'd have his game plan now.
I personally predict that it'll be more like Uber in the aspect of, I think that similar to what you're saying, there'll be an initiative to get cars from people and pay off that debt and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But instead of it being like you own this car, I think that it would be more of like you have access to this app and you can call a car at any time you want.
Yeah. One of the things he's working on is the Tesla network, which is really interesting with the self-driving cars, where if I were him in that scenario, I would have, I would give people the option to get any Tesla they wanted.
Right.
And it's like, how many hours are you at work a day? Okay, exactly. 10 hours. Have this go out and work for the Tesla network while you're at work.
That's what I'm saying.
At that point, I would buy Uber just for the list.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not saying that it would, and I'm not saying exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it would be Uber's app, but it's like that technology is where I see the future of us transportation going. Because
you see a merger of the ideas of Uber and Tesla, self-driving networks, and then
look at PayPal. It kind of is the same thing. Like when he developed PayPal, like he looked at the banking structure and looked at how they were doing it, and then applied it to PayPal.
Yeah.
So he kind of like took what was working and then made it better.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, if you really think about it, it doesn't make much sense to own a car today because it's just a liability. You can't really sell it back because the minute you drive it off the lot, it's worth like a third of the value of whenever you bought it. So you can't really sell it back and get your money's worth out of it. So it's not an investment because it loses value.
Yeah.
So every single day for hours at a time, when you're actually at the place that you're transporting yourself to, it's just sitting and doing nothing and wasting money and just sitting. And someone could break it. Someone could steal it. It could get struck by lightning. Like literally anything could happen to that vehicle while it's just sitting there.
Yeah.
But if you don't physically own it and you're a part of some sort of drive club or Uber app or something like that, and I can just say, oh, I need to go somewhere, boom, boom, and there's already Teslas in the area, right? Because obviously it wouldn't take that long because they would strategically place them, and I just, boom, boom, there's a Tesla faster than an Uber could get here, except I can get in it, I can drive it, or more than likely is it'll all be self-automated cars.
Oh, absolutely. And you get to a certain point where even in the beginning,
traffic, actually.
Yeah, because if all the cars could communicate with each other like
there's
that.
There's no need for lights. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no need for light. Like you don't have collisions anymore.
Exactly. I saw an infographic. You can look up on YouTube what the world would look like if people didn't drive cars. And I think it's the infographics show. It's like one of those animated series. And they actually did a really good job of outlining how that would look. And I know if you're listening to this, you can't really see what I'm about to do with my hands, but essentially it's like these it would be able to intercross each other, kind of like a hashtag, like imagine a hashtag, but with like 50 lines up and 50 lines down, like a tic-tac-toe board or something. That's essentially what traffic would be like, because when stuff is self-automated, it's all on these cycles and it can interact and read the other technology at the same time. So there's never a point in that cross that these two vehicles will touch each other. They'll perfectly miss each other every time. So instead of red lights, it would just be constant movement the entire time, and you would immediately step in your car and get there.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be, I have to wait in 15 minutes because I have to stop at 5 red lights on the way. It would be more like, I don't need to own a car because I'm only in the car for 5 minutes to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you realize that a lot of these things, I say you realize a lot. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I do that to not say that I know what there is to realize, but I'm just kind of connecting my thought process to my idea of what could happen.
Right.
From my own logical process of, I'm really saying I realize that you can.
And these are just ideas.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, although I have an idea, you have an idea, neither one of us, I would assume, because of the things that we've been talking about in our directions, neither one of us are starting a car company and putting these ideas into motion.
Neither one of us are Elon Musk.
Exactly.
He could have an idea that could blow us all away.
Exactly. His trajectory, he is as passionate and dedicated to what he's doing as I am to this creative process.
Yeah.
And that can change at any moment. Like, no one knows what I'm going to put out with my creative process. Only I do, because I decide what's going to be in the video. It's the same exact thing. It's just for cars. You know? It's like, who knows? At the end of the day, Elon Musk's going to do what Elon Musk wants to do, because it's his company.
Plain and simple. And it comes down to he's building an infrastructure for a society that he wishes he could be a part of.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm wanting to do with this decentralized education, which is decentralized self-education. I see a world where, let's say the technology was in place that we're trying to get together now in a way where it's readily accessible for teachers to extend their classroom from a level of mass production where they teach the same, 50-minute class 5 times a day to one 50-minute class that could reach every single living soul for the rest of time.
Right.
That's what I envision, where you have about a year or two of every teacher, recording their classroom, putting it up on the blockchain. That lesson is saved for all of time.
Right. Plain
and simple. You can decentralize education like that, not so that teachers lose their jobs, but so every child, the whole point of public education in the beginning, so that every child can get an education.
Right.
You forego the schooling model, get them to learn the things that they want, lead them to the things that they need through what they want with, the unschooling type philosophies that I stumbled across before these unschooling movements through the way that I learned to teach myself. And you realize you have this internet of education where it's not about you don't have the internet as we know it, where everything is overlapping.
Right.
Education, economics, for-profit, non-profit, all of these things interlapping on one internet. I'm like, if you have interdependent internets, you can have the integrity without the confusion.
Right.
And that's why we want to empower teachers, empower parents, empower students at any age level, anywhere in the world. This will become more popular in other places in the world that don't have, a centralized free education system. Right. But after a point, it'll do the same thing as Wikipedia did. It's like it'll go from being questionable to having that exponential curve of this works.
Yeah.
And to that point, maybe, America will demand that we try it alongside. That's the beauty, where just like particle physics, exists alongside our world of physics, our physical reality, it doesn't mean that they can't coexist and that one doesn't empower the other.
Exactly.
And I'm like, at that point, we can have this where you could have free education because you paid for it once with time and energy, with teachers immortalizing their lessons.
Yeah.
You have infinite free education, not the socialistic way, but improving on it with an improved solution through things like the library blockchain, not even necessarily on library, which if you want to check that out, that's at library.io. That's spelled LBRY.io.
Mm-hmm.
But, library is really taking on YouTube.
Right.
But you could use the library blockchain, open source, free to copy, to create your own library, your own library of consciousness, your own library of podcasting. And I'm looking to build, I've already built my library of consciousness. I'm helping other people create their libraries for their nonprofits, which I'm really decentralizing the marketing knowledge, the growth hacking knowledge that I've gotten over the years.
Right.
All of my resources have been gotten through mentors and books. Mm-hmm. So I've gotten to where I am with just time and energy invested into listening to people who are doing things today. And I want to, more or less, by decentralizing education, decentralize mentorship.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really powerful. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where I can give you my hour, but I can't give everyone on the planet my hour. And that develops legacy. Yeah. Like you were saying, it not only immortalizes.
That's what Gary Vee is doing.
Exactly. Yeah. It not only immortalizes the education and the message, it actually immortalizes the legacy of that person, because everything that teacher puts out there, if that teacher is putting out all of their information, 100 years from now, their great-great-great-grandchildren that don't have any idea who they are, they will never meet that person because they will never walk on the planet at the same time, can know you better than the people that you saw physically every day of your life.
Yeah.
Because you've
seen their successes and their failures.
Exactly. And because they decided to take that time to put that out there.
Yes.
They didn't just sit on the information. They didn't just wait for someone else to do it. Those people that are out there like Gary Vee, the reason he's successful is because we all have these ideas. We all think these strategies. We all have an idea of the way that things are going, because it's all based on him just listening to what people are saying. Everything that Gary comes up with is literally he listens to the audience, sees what they want, sees what they're saying, and sees what they react to, and then he goes backwards and makes stuff that is in line with what they're already listening to, what they're already reacting to.
Yeah.
And so, if you just sit there and you wait for someone else to do it, then you're going to be left behind. But if you're pushing forward, even if you're wrong, quote unquote, you're still pushing forward. You're still part of what is moving things into a better direction ultimately. If you're not taking action, it is so much worse to not take any action at all than it is to take an action that others deem is wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing is one of the things I admire Gary for doing, which is something that I had to learn on my own before I discovered his videos, and I've been sharing those with anyone who wants to understand how I got to where I am with how I understand myself in business.
Right.
And it's, it comes down to what I've seen with him is he's sharing his stories. Mm-hmm. He's listening to other people's stories, saying the similarities, calling out the bullshit we've been trained to believe.
Yep.
And it comes down to he's introducing mental health into entrepreneurship.
Exactly. And he's not scared to call out where he was wrong.
Yeah.
He'll sit there and he'll call you out, not because he's calling you out or putting you on the spot, but he'll actually call you out and say, no, I actually know that's bullshit. You want to know why? Because I did the same thing and I thought this way. And you want to know why I'm successful? Because I told that feeling to go fuck off and I went and made it happen.
Absolutely.
It's like he understands because he was there. He was the guy on you. Like, you have to realize we live in 2018. People actually go to YouTube. When Gary was starting this, everyone told him he was an idiot because people weren't going and listening to his content. No one was. He went and made for 2 years.
His idea of brands was crazy back then.
Yeah, no one was listening. Yeah. And now everyone is clawing and trying to see what he has to say because they realized that they just weren't taking action. And because he was constantly taking action, constantly putting his information out there, you don't know what's going to be successful. I'm putting my information on every platform that's out there because tomorrow Facebook could become what happened to MySpace.
Yeah.
They could completely change what their platform is and no one uses it overnight. Yeah. Just like Snapchat. Instagram puts out an update where you can make stories and most of Snapchat's engagement and usability goes down. Most people just stop using it.
And you start to realize that these platforms like Library are essentially YouTube, Netflix, iTunes, all of these platforms. It's like, but somebody came along and said, okay, instead of creating the new YouTube, the new Netflix, the new iTunes, how do we cut ourselves out of
the whole system?
The whole system, so we're as equal as everyone else. We don't have any more control. Even the playing field in a way where they're decentralizing business. I'm like, you take that one step further, realize they're just a stock. It's like if we really decentralize an economy, you realize that cryptocurrency has a counterpart that's missing, that's almost like crypto exchange, where it's like truly decentralized exchanges that have no for-profit model on an exchange network. Combined with cryptocurrency, they don't need to have a currency protocol. Mm-hmm. They need to involve, cryptocurrencies, stocks, other things of value to interchange things, even knowledge. And I'm just building, right now an exchange of information in a way that I've realized in my past decade and a half of consulting, from tech to marketing to, mental health, from a personal progress type thing, not a medical mental. I don't practice medical mental health. It's more confidence type mental health. I'm helping people going through their mental health process, encouraging them to get a practitioner, but also telling them to be confident in themselves, realizing that, we're not really educated. We're trained in so many areas of life to compute data, but we don't process our own beliefs, feelings, all these things, so we don't know who we really are.
Right.
We're trying to mirror what other people tell us is right, and when we try it, we realize it's wrong for us. Right. And that's what Gary Vee keeps saying. Yeah. It's like, what you want isn't wrong, but it's wrong the way you're doing it. Figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't necessarily seem right, but gets you to that goal,
Well, see, the reason it doesn't seem right to them is because they're not getting financial repercussions immediately. Yeah. That's where it all comes down, is ultimately, if you want to put out a message, you have to accept that you're not going to make money off of it immediately. If you are going to eventually make money off of it, which is not always the case.
And if you do, it's probably not going to last forever.
Exactly.
You've probably just hit it the right time.
Exactly. You have to realize that the goal cannot be money. If the goal is money, you will fail, because at some point in time, when you even if you get success, even if you get the millions of dollars, you will still have something bigger than you that you want. Gary Vee wants to buy the Jets. Yeah. So although to you he may seem like the most successful person on the planet and you want his life, to him he's nowhere near where he wants to be. So to him, he's failing because he's still not there yet.
Yeah.
And he's still trying to get past that and make something successful. I think that's the biggest thing, is remembering that no matter where you are, you're always, every single day, in this day. And although you may have more things because yesterday you did something beneficial to help future you and you've got life a little bit easier, ultimately still the same person just woke up that day with more things available to them.
Yeah.
So we've been talking here for a a bit. We're at about the 2.5 hour mark. So we went about an hour over. We got a good conversation. Yeah, exactly. But just kind of some ending notes. Like, what are some of the projects that you want people to check out? Like anything that you want to, get people to look at?
Yeah. So right now, the way I'm implementing this new Library of Alexandria concept is introducing it into education and nonprofit work specifically. Getting people the right information in a way that they can trust the information that they're doing, and getting it out there is usually only something that's focused on by for-profit industry.
Right.
So I've taken the marketing expertise, the growth hacking expertise that I've learned over the years, shifted from a for-profit mindset to a nonprofit mindset to teach the nonprofits how to educate their audience on, what they're doing, also things that they're doing to support what they're doing as a nonprofit, so that they can, become authorities as educators. I'm looking to empower educators that didn't even know that they were educators.
Right.
And this is something where, Gary Vee, like we've talked about, he's doing that. So it's like he's an educator who is doing in the now. And I'm trying to build this community that when I first started, I thought I was the only one. I wanted to build this internet of education because I wanted to be a part of it. And I'm realizing people like you, we just stayed in an Airbnb because we live in Mexico and stayed in an Airbnb down in El Cajon. I'm like, these people here, they're working on, their own, what I'm calling nodes on these decentralized internet. There's no master nodes. There's no nodes that have more control than others. It's just all have the idea of giving away information because you guys understand that with proper branding that Gary Vee talks about, especially the idea that was so crazy in the late 90s when he was applying it to YouTube and saying this is what's going to make YouTube great, he was considered crazy. Yeah. Now we live in a day and age where if you understand how to do branding and you produce good content, you don't need to copyright, trademark, get a contract, get deals in place. It's just you have the branding in place.
And just to clarify for those that are listening, because I do know a lot of creative people in various walks of their process are listening to this, when he says putting out good content, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're recording in 4K with 24 frames per second and you have all the lights and all the audio. Putting out good content means you're putting out value-driven, informational content that is actually relevant and passionate to what you're doing. You can pick out a cell phone and record good content. So just to clarify, when we say good content, we're not talking about the visual appeal and quality of the work. We're talking about the actual meat and bones of what it is you're putting out there.
Yeah, it's not unlike friendship where you can change and do whatever it takes to get friends, but you might be pretending to be someone else who you really are. Who you really are. The difference between getting consumers and fans is kind of what you're talking about for creatives. It's like, do I look for consumers or fans? What are fans? We want fans to be paying, but they aren't always paying up front. That's confusing because a fan is literally somebody who hears or sees what you're doing, and they want to be your friend. Yeah. And the most they can do at that point is be your fan. Yeah. But a fan is really just a distributed friend you have somewhere.
That's very true.
And it's very interesting because this is the sort of structure that we're kind of basing, or not kind of, we are basing the whole decentralized education platform on. It's giving a place where it's for teachers by teachers. Yeah. It's niched in that area but it's also redefining how people look at educators. It's like what qualifies as an educator. It's like if you were doing or if you were teaching somebody, whether it's, in a conversation type format that Gary Vee is doing all the time everywhere. He's educating people by sharing conversations that used to be one-on-one. And I'm like, he's mentoring somebody and distributing it globally. And I'm like, this is a platform for people like Gary Vee, people like Robert Greene, people like Taleb, people like, Elon Musk, or anyone who is doing something in the now can bring value to people by distributing that information the same way that even Jeff Bezos really believes in. It's distributing things. He's taking down the music industry, the publishing industry by creating a publishing house that only takes a cut when you sell you can put it on there for free. Right. And it's all of these things. He's decentralizing retail. I believe that if there's going to be a first company that says we're not actually going to pass on, the ownership of the company to another person or the stockholders, we're going to completely decentralize it would probably be Amazon. Right. It's a simple protocol that decentralized tech can.
That's why I do a lot with Alexa and skills and voices and everything. It's definitely going to be something that people need to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. He's decentralizing everything. Retail. He's not becoming the retail giant. He's decentralizing the retail conglomerate. And it's all of these things are happening in sectors. Yeah. And I'm just taking on the education sector.
And where do people find you? Find your information? Like if they're wanting to follow along on this path and really be supportive of the journey that you're doing, where would people go and look? Like where do you want people to be sent to?
The educationaldarkweb.com will always point to my most prominent project.
Right.
So that URL will always that'll be pointing to different places on the internet, and if the internet gets redefined, pointing to different places after that. That will always point to my most relevant project.
Mm-hmm.
The educational darkweb.com is my decentralized URL where it points to other things that I'm doing, like my Library of Consciousness at libraryofconsciousness.com. Also, the new Library of Alexandria, we're working on that web hub for all the things we're doing, like building these infrastructures for nonprofits that are essentially like what you've built for yourself here. Mm-hmm. We're going to be teaching other people how to do that from scratch in a way that Gary Vee encourages people to do, and we're telling people how to do it step by step that are right now locked behind courses and paid course, all these things. It's like right now people have to decide between, do I give up my money or my time? And I'm like, if people are asked to give up both, the people, the creatives that need to be empowered the most, the musicians, the artists, the creatives of the world, if they don't have money to give up but they have time, we are crushing the creatives. Even as marketers in my own sector are crushing creatives because we want to get paid for an education that if we don't know how to use proper branding as a marketer to monetize beyond the education, we're doing what I call unethical marketing. Right. If you are getting paid to teach, which is a very controversial topic right now, I'm saying that there are better ways to teach than getting paid to teach. Absolutely. In the way that most teachers understand.
Yeah. Well, if you require value from someone else to sustain your way of thinking and sustain your life, then you can't provide efficient value, because ultimately everything I tell you is going to be hinged on the fact that I need a paycheck from you. I need to sustain myself. I have to do these things so that I can live. And whenever you're basing your livelihood on what you can inform someone on, then ultimately it's flawed just from.
And it can become compromised, which we've seen with the teaching industry. I love teachers. I just don't like it when they are in a position where their integrity as a teacher can be compromised because, of a pay cut or whatever, or getting fired. I'm like, that, if they're more afraid of getting fired than teaching what they know is right, you're compromising the whole integrity of the education system. Exactly. What I want to do is empower the teachers that have to teach, where it's a passion, and they might have a job on the weekends or a summer job to support their teaching habit. Those are the people we want to empower. Where I'm like, if you had a part-time job and you had even less hours and you did it, to the point where you could teach one lesson for 50 minutes instead of 8 hours a day and all of that, and you had to find a way to supplement your teaching habit on the side. It's like you could teach one lesson that could reach billions of children. That's what we envision.
That's what we started with. I can give you my hour, but I can't give everyone my hour. And if I put everything that I have into an hour that I can then produce and distribute and share, then I can record an hour with one classroom, do the best message that I can, and then no matter where you are on the planet, where you are in time, you can go back and watch that hour and get all the information that all those people did, and maybe even more, because you can rewind it and watch it over and over and over and over. But
the thing is these things, they don't have to come across the way we even think of school. Some of the best lessons I got, that when I combined them with my, intelligence that was based on memorized knowledge that I knew was useful, I just didn't understand myself enough to make it useful in my life, I realized that a lot of the philosophy that I got enough to understand myself, to have the confidence in myself that Gary Vee is helping people get over the best way he can. I want to empower that kind of knowledge network. Because I'm like, at this point, there's not an easily accessible way where you can self-educate for free in a way that that it's about that. Right. And the internet right now is confusing. It can be about anything. That's why we're building this network in a way where we want to empower people to share their knowledge in a way that, isn't necessarily the way that's normally seen now. If you want to get a lesson, it's got to be in a book format or a course. I'm like, a lot of the best lessons I got were from TV shows that had deep layers or movies that had deep layers. It doesn't matter if it's labeled as fiction.
Right.
These are the things that I help to understand myself. So we're breaking down the paradigms of how you educate yourself, not just with books, not just with courses, not just with instructional videos, but movies, TV shows, podcasts, like videos, all sorts of things that are very unorthodox ways to get a lesson. Because even if that 1% of, let's say, the Matrix, I don't believe like 99% of the Matrix is real, but if there's one piece in it, I'm like, it's this confidence of overcoming what I've been told is real. If that's all it takes for you to become the next Steve Jobs, we're not looking to be Steve Jobs and saying, we're starting up the blockchain company that you need to try. Like, we're the blockchain company for creatives, come to the new Library of Alexandria. And like Steve Jobs was with Apple, we're more saying, come here, everyone is equal.
Yeah.
You can all start up your own Apple, your own Tesla. You can all be the next great creative.
Right.
And whether it's business, music, or whether you want to be The Weeknd, who's a great example of somebody who would thrive in this decentralized exchange of information. So check us out at theeducationaldarkweb.com. That'll always point to our most recent stuff. You'll recognize our branding all around the web, the Library of Consciousness, some of the nonprofits that I'm working with, homeistogether.org, and I'm talking with another great nonprofit right now. It's Crypto Leaf over in Europe. It's doing great stuff for the green movement, and we're all working together to build a network of nonprofits to figure out how to growth hack that industry. So if you want to learn more about us, theeducationaldarkweb.com, like I said, will always point to what we're doing. Always check back with it, see if it's pointing someplace new. Right. And that's it.
And all of those links will be updated down in the description. Thank you so much, Jace, for the time. It has been a great episode. I can say we've talked about quite a few things that give me going. I love it. The gears are turning. All of the information of everything we talked about is going to be down in the description. You can check out all of those links. Be sure to follow Jace on all of his social media, and just check out the progress of his Library of Consciousness and the Library of Alexandria as it gets developed. So it's been great having you on, and you guys have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.
If you like this episode of the podcast, please be sure to subscribe and follow on whatever your listening application of choice may be, so that you can get notifications of new episodes every single week. You can see the video for the show on native platforms where video might be hosted, where you can like, comment, and share to show your support and get this out there to more people that may not see it otherwise. Links to all the products that I use to make this content, as well as other ways that you can help support the channel, are found down in the description below. Additionally, you'll find all the links for all the things that we talked about throughout the episode down in the description, so that you can learn more about Jace and follow him on his creative journey. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you back here next week. Bye!